This is the voice of the Report of the Week, signing on. Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone listening in to today's broadcast of VORW International. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to spend it here at VORW. Today's broadcast, I'm not sure how long it's going to be. It's definitely going to be several hours long, probably in the 3-hour range. And we're going to be covering a wide variety of topics in today's show, including some current events, especially going on in the United States, as well as between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We're going to discuss some updates in terms of radio. And finally, we have many, many wonderful listener emails and pieces of feedback to read. We also have a number of fan art pieces to feature for our YouTube viewers. We have 5 pieces of fan art, and I'd like to credit them as follows. The first piece goes out to Kyle in New Zealand. The second piece of fan art goes out to Andrew S. The third piece of fan art goes out to James Hill, who may be found on Instagram at Captain Gravy Art. That's captain.gravy.art on Instagram, Captain Gravy Art. Piece 4 goes out to Matty Cloud, and piece 5 goes out to an anonymous listener who just says, I'm not good at all at drawing, but I still enjoy it. I hope it doesn't offend you at my poor skills, but I had a lot of fun attempting this one. So that is the fan art for today's broadcast. If you'd like to submit a piece of fan art and are feeling artistically inclined, you may do so by just drawing whatever you would like, and then send it as an attachment to VORWINFO@gmail.com. Just email it to me. Include it in the email, and I'll try to feature it on the broadcast, and just let me know how you would like to be credited. If there's a social media account you want me to credit to you, a website, or just a name, and I'll be happy to do that. Finally, on one other note, in regards to the broadcast, as we know, this show is recorded in different segments, right? In that, I mean, there are parts of the show which were recorded the other day, and parts of it which were recorded earlier today, and I do it in bits and pieces. This intro is actually the last thing that I record, so I have the rest of the show to look back on. One thing that I will be talking about in the broadcast, actually next after this intro, are some concerns I have in regards to the U.S. election. It is apolitical, so don't think that I'm going to be taking sides or pointing fingers. You have enough of that these days, so don't worry, there's none of that. But I just express concerns about the possibility of violence around the election, regardless of outcome. And this was recorded before the COVID-19 diagnosis of President Trump and many other high-ranking U.S. government officials. So I think that while this has certainly shaken things up a bit, I still don't think that it will necessarily change the outcome. I don't know if it will pour fuel on the fire. I think it just depends on what happens. It's a very, very variable, fluid situation at this point, but we will just have to see. So obviously I have been following the news. I've seen what's going on. COVID-19, in my opinion, it's still no laughing matter, and it affects everyone differently. But really, my thoughts go out to anyone affected by it, that they're able to bounce back. It's a disease that I hope no one deals with, no matter who that might be. So, obviously I have heard the news, and I did just want to address that, but I don't think it necessarily changes what it is that I will be talking about. It's just, like we said, a very fluid situation, and we really don't know what's going to happen or how it will necessarily impact things one way or another. But that's just a little bit of an addendum to what we will be discussing next. But otherwise, that's about it. Any feedback on the program is welcome. You can send in an email to VORWINFO@gmail.com. And if you do enjoy this broadcast and you want to hear more of it, just consider a donation if you like the show via PayPal to VORWINFO@gmail.com or via Patreon at patreon.com/thereportoftheweek. Anything helps. Just listen to the show and just think, well, if I like it and I want to hear more of it, consider supporting. But we have no sponsors, no advertisers, and it's really just you, the listener, that helps us out. So it's up to you. In the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy the broadcast. This is VORW. Alright, let's get right into things. I have a couple topics to discuss today. Not a ton. Not a ton, but a few things here and there, mostly pertaining to what's going on around the world. And then we have plenty of fantastic emails to read, so there is no lack of discussion topics for this broadcast. That I could assure you, that I can guarantee you. But starting off the show, there's a few things, and I think I usually do this nowadays. It's kind of, part of the format of the show, I guess. A few things going on around the world that have been on my mind. One or two experiences to share. And then after that, we're just going to get into the listener emails, listener letters, listener feedback. And we'll just go from there. The first thing that's been on my mind, and it's been on my mind more than I had hoped, but I guess it just is how it is, The U.S. election, I know we talked about it in the last show, and again, this is not going to be any sort of partisan discussion. This really isn't going to be about the politics of it, which is kind of a silly thing to say, not discussing the politics of an election, right? How does that even make any sense? But hear me out as to what aspect I do have concerns about, and what I feel at this point is no longer a what if, but is a 100% inevitability. As extreme a thing I'm about to say, at least I feel that it is. So I am braced for it mentally, but I'm not looking forward to it one single bit, because it is certainly going to be a low point for society, for this country, for civility. I will tell you that. Regardless, in my opinion, of who wins the election, or by what means, or how close it is, there will be violence on election day, no doubt about it. I don't see it any other way. They have one side pitted against the other to such an extent. It's not going to be a civil war. It's not going to be people going house to house. Let me see your voter registration, and they're going to see what party you are, and if you're not one of them, they'll round you up and eliminate you. That's not. It's not going to be like that. What I mean is that I think no matter what happens, the writing's on the wall. The signs are there. How can there not be? Let me ask you that. We're so divided, we're so polarized, and is it getting any better? Right? Is it? Likely not. I don't see that being the case. See, the thing is that most people still, I think, are reasonable individuals. Most people may get fired up or heated about various political, social issues, etc. It's okay to feel passionate about that stuff, by all means. But there is a certain, not even sizable percentage, but again, when you're talking about lives, even a small percentage is startling, regardless. That is either just so, so far gone, so past the point of no return, where they feel it, I almost want to say acceptable, to do serious harm onto those who feel differently on the issues. It's like they see every problem that affects them is because of these people. So if we just get rid of them and kill them all, or at least teach them a lesson, i.e., breaking their legs, etc., running them over with the car, then that'll show them. And it's an ideology that it's prevalent not just on one side, it's prevalent on both sides. It used to be, opposing views, opposing political parties. Then it was, us versus them, and now it's good versus evil, right? And I think I even said this in the last show. Who are the good guys? Who are the evil guys? That depends on who you ask. Ask a different person, you're going to get a different answer. What's going to happen, in my opinion, and this is just my foreshadowing, is that you're going to have protests. Like I said, regardless of whatever happens, if it's a blowout one way or the other, don't just think that if my candidate wins, there won't be any protests and everything will be all right. Don't even think that for a second. People will take to the streets one way or another. I think it's going to be a situation, there might not even be an outright winner on election night, honestly. People, at least in the major cities, will be on the streets. You're going to have protests, you're going to have counter-protests, and at best, there's going to be very heated exchanges between those two groups, and there will probably be serious injuries or deaths resulting from that. At worst, expect many of those protests to devolve into riots, and then expect, widespread looting, arson, etc. I just think things are getting further and further apart, and you're starting to see, at these different protests and riots, etc., more and more people from differing viewpoints, they start attacking each other. You start seeing these things happening across the country with greater frequency, It's not just one side doing this to another, it's happening both ways. Really, the partisan divide is probably the greatest it's been in a while. Or at least people are very, very passionate about it one way or another. My advice to you, personally, if you want to vote, that's up to you. I say it's your right to do so. I'm not going to sit there and force you to. That's another thing that I hate. I hate these people that they tell you to vote, and then they sneak in this subtle type of message where it's like, it's so important to vote, and make sure you go and vote for this person, too. It's like, I'm all about incentivizing people to vote if that's what they want to do, but I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for. That's up to you. That's up to you. So, if you want to vote early, that's purely your choice. If you want to vote on election day, and especially, I think election day and then the following days, or maybe even weeks, are going to be very messy. Just be ready for that. So my personal advice to you on election day, go about your business and then go home and stay in. That's my advice to you. Now I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong, but I don't know. I'd say the election is one of the most contentious issues of the entire year, and it certainly hasn't calmed down. If anything, it's only gotten worse. I mean, you just see how it is. So, how can it not be messy? That's the question that I'm asking, and that's the question that I keep asking myself. And I haven't any answers, so as a result, I think the only reasonable assumption is that it will get messy. It really just depends how much. I think violent protests, riots, maybe shootings, etc., are going to be an inevitability. It's just how widespread. Personally, I think it'll probably just be in the, downtown areas of major cities, like you see often. It's those certain in the major metropolitan areas, and then things get, a bit crazy as it gets, usually later in the day, and that's usually the cycle of things. But I don't know. The big defining factor is just what happens in the next month. And then how does election night play out, It's going to be a rough time, and I am going to breathe a sigh of relief once it's all over, honestly. But what am I really, what am I holding my breath for at this point? It's like, you're going to breathe a sigh of relief, but it's not going to get any better. It's really not. Don't expect it to. For 1 second, once this election passes, the divide is already here to stay. It's going to continue in one way or another. It's not like as soon as a winner is declared and it ends up being settled matter, whoever that ends up being, Everyone's gonna say, oh, all right, we're friends again, Yeah, if only, right? But, honestly, election night, stay in. If I were you. If you plan on, rallying, protesting, whatever, keep the peace and just understand that you may find yourself in a situation where you might have people hurling punches at you. Someone might try to throw a brick at you. You might have bullets flying if it gets bad. You might have someone trying to mow you down with their car. Or you might be lucky and nothing will happen. All I'm saying is that if you are going to do anything, just anticipate the worst. Because that's just what all the signs seem to be pointing toward. And, you can say, oh, this sounds like some sort of, mentally ill, paranoid, whatever, conspiracy. But you look for yourself. Look at how many other people in this country have the exact same fears and the exact same worries that there will be some sort of violence on Election Day. It's not just one guy making this up, saying, I had this dream and I think this is going to happen, or, that, some ghost came up to me and said, there's going to be protests and riots on election night. Now, there's millions of other Americans and people all around the world who have the same feelings, the same sentiments, and that exists for a reason. Because I think many people, myself included, feel that, at least to a certain degree, election night, it's going to be the point where it all boils over. But what happens. I feel like we're headed off a cliff. Society is, anyway. But sometimes that's just, you get caught up in this spiral of negativity, and like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I can look back at this and say to myself, how silly of me to think this way. Right? I want to do that. God, I hope so. I hope I can look, in the days and weeks ahead, I can look back at this and I could say I was caught up in the negativity, caught up in the worries, and, now that I look back at it, I can kind of have a laugh at myself and think how ridiculous this was. So, I hope that'll happen. I hope that'll happen. I don't want this to be true, but I firmly believe in the ideology, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And I think it's better to expect for election night a literal bloodbath, sadly in the metaphorical but absolutely literal sense, and then be ready for that and not have that transpire, right? Then you can breathe a sigh of relief, at least for that. Not any better relations, but the fact that at least it didn't devolve to the extent I thought it would, as opposed to sitting there and thinking it's going to be, peaceful and everyone's going to be fine, and then have it be this disastrous night and just be blindsided and terrified, right? Just be ready for the worst, that's all. That's all. It's my view. You don't have to agree with it, but that's just how I'm kind of, observing the short-term future. Rough seas ahead. Brace yourselves and be ready. A very dark talk, but there's no way I couldn't talk about it. It's too much on my mind. Too much on my mind. One geopolitical event that is going on right now that seems to be different from how it was previously, and I didn't talk about this earlier in the year, I think it was around June or July. Armenia and Azerbaijan. So these are two countries in the Caucasus region. And where that is located on the world map, to really put that into perspective, let's load up our map here so we can really visualize this, because I could explain it, but it's always good to have the other countries nearby as just a more accurate pointer. So the Caucasus region is located, not quite in the Middle East, it's its own region, but it's located really to the northeast of Turkey, It's kind of sandwiched in this area, right? You have the Black Sea to the west. To the north, right? So think of it as this little... You have the water on both sides. To the north is Russia. And then to the south is Turkey and Iran. And in this area, there are 3 countries. You have Georgia, not the U.S. state. You have Armenia, and you have Azerbaijan. And all of these countries used to be part of the Soviet Union, right, up until, I believe, the early 90s, when the Soviet Union was dissolved. And sometimes you'll hear about it every now and then, sometimes you'll hear about, even back in the day, Chechnya, Chechen rebels. And now more recently, you'll hear about conflicts, again, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Now, these are 2 nations that are directly next to each other. They share a border. I mean, they're right there. They are neighbors to each other. And as one can imagine, since we are discussing a conflict between the 2, they have very bad blood between one another. Now, it's a complicated conflict, so I'm going to kind of simplify it and dumb it down a little bit, but it's the most, I would hope, accurate and understandable explanation. Largely, what has at least caused this conflict, and it's existed for decades at this point, is really ethnic, religious differences, as well as a geographic dispute as well. And I think, unfortunately, that's what so many of these conflicts end up being, right? You have different religious groups, different ethnicities, that they just hate each other, they fight and fight and fight. Or sometimes, they fight over these scraps of land that one country says should rightfully be theirs and the other adamantly holds on to. So on and so forth. You just have these conflicts. And Armenia and Azerbaijan is no exception. You see, there's this one strip of land on the border of Armenia and Azerbaijan called Nagorno-Karabakh. And what that is again, it's a strip of land and about 7 settlements therein that is part of Armenia and has been for decades. But Azerbaijan claims that this strip of land is theirs and should be theirs, right? Azerbaijan wants it. They say that this is part of their country. Armenia says, no, it's not. It's part of us. This is Armenian territory. And, they say the people here want to be a part of Armenia. Well, then Azerbaijan says, no, they want to be a part of us, and we're going to reclaim it, and this should have always been part of Azerbaijan, right? You have this back and forth. And it hasn't always just been a conflict on paper. There have been many, many clashes and disputes. It went all the way to a full-blown war back in 1994, after the Soviet Union was dissolved. And unfortunately, that war didn't really... It was a stalemate, pretty much. And the divide is just as big as ever, and there's still this bad blood between the 2 countries. So every now and then, nowadays, this, strip of land, the border nearby, is just so heavily militarized, It's like you have perpetually Azerbaijan getting ready, to try to attack. You have Armenia getting ready to repel the attacks, and vice versa. And you just have all these weapons and stuff just stockpiled there, and troops pretty much there constantly. And every couple years, there's always some sort of altercation. I remember in 2016, there were some clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In 2018, there were. And then obviously in 2020, earlier in the year, there were clashes too. But, they fight for a few days, they launch a few mortars, they blow a few things up. Unfortunately, lives get lost. But then, these regional powers end up as the mediator. And, sometimes Russia will come in and they'll give them the slap on the wrist. They'll say, you guys, knock it off. And then they'll behave for a little bit and the fighting will calm down. Or, you get these different countries that come in, and I always joke whenever I see this, because it's just a joke at this point. The UN will come in and they'll say, we have deep concern. It's always the same two words. You ever notice that? Deep concern. They have deep concern over this. And eventually everyone calms down, and they kind of go back to back to their sides, and that's it. So why are we, this seems, you might be saying, okay, well, this seems to be a fairly regular occurrence. Why are you talking about it now? Maybe I've seen some news about this lately. Is there something different about this conflict? This surge in fighting this time around? Well, here's the issue. Right now, it appears that, number one, this latest bout in fighting doesn't seem to have been sparked by anything in particular. Armenia says that Azerbaijan is leading an offensive to try to recapture this area completely, and Azerbaijan says, no, Armenia, they're the aggressors. They killed one of our soldiers for no reason, and now we're retaliating, and there is no explanation as to why this even, started this time around. All we know is that on Sunday the 27th of September, fighting began, and it has been escalating ever since. And the thing that's different about the conflict this time around is that, at this point, it usually would have de-escalated by now. But that's not happening. None of the world powers are really doing much about it. I think they're probably too concerned about, sadly, the US election to really care. And there are some rumors going around, specifically in regards to Azerbaijan, that they may, and this is just alleged, be getting direct assistance from Turkey. Now, that all depends, some people say that's propaganda, some people don't. But there are some interesting signs kind of pointing to maybe some outside interference there. Either way, the weaponry that's being used by both sides is advanced, and as a result, it's a mess. There's no real death toll at this point, but just looking from what I've seen, there's probably hundreds and hundreds dead from one side to the next. Obviously, Armenia claims, and you have these inflated numbers from each side. Armenia claims that they killed 790 Azerbaijan soldiers and wounded 2,000 others, whereas Azerbaijan claims that they killed 2,300 Armenian soldiers. So you have these greatly inflated numbers, but one thing that is undeniable is that there has been lots of death, lots of destruction. And again, you have very heavy weaponry being used, probably as we speak. Countless numbers of tanks. You see many videos of those getting blown up. You have drone strikes being used. You have long-range heavy artillery, mortars, lots and lots of just constant bombardment with shelling and even some airstrikes here and there. One big escalation, or at least rumor of escalation, was Armenia claimed, well, there were two claims made, both of which are huge escalations if it's true. They claim, number one, that Azerbaijan began attacking Armenia outside of this contested region, right? And that almost never happens. So that would be concerning if that ends up being true, that they are being attacked in an area where this fighting doesn't normally happen. And secondly, they claim that it was a Turkish F-16 that shot down an Armenian jet aircraft. And obviously, if that ends up being true, right, then that is a huge escalation, because then you have directly, right, Turkish aircraft coming in and almost having a type of dogfight with Armenian aircraft, shooting them down, right? And that would spell direct involvement, and then when that happens, sometimes, there are rumors that they could invoke this certain type of treaty and get assistance from other countries, and so on. But, some countries seem skeptical of that, others believe that to be true, but again, just from my understanding of geopolitical events, Turkey, like them or not, they do tend to get involved in various conflicts. They've certainly taken a very active role in the Syrian civil war. They've been taking a greater role in the Libyan civil war. They still, have conflict almost on a daily basis with some of the Kurds in northern Iraq. And obviously they are a big ally of Azerbaijan. So knowing the fighting that is going on and the extent of it, is there certainly a possibility that Turkey is directly getting involved? That might be. But I don't know. They deny it. They say, no, that's not us. We didn't do anything here, so they completely deny it. But I don't know. It's just, I wouldn't write that off at this point. Hopefully it'll calm down, but this is very, very intense, and from the footage that I've seen, it looks like a total war at this point. Just the scale of it, what's being used, it's not just a couple guys with AK-47s, shooting over a fence at each other. You're seeing very, very heavy weaponry, one side to the next, and unfortunately, not only do I feel bad about just the loss of life amongst even those fighting, but I especially feel bad, for all of the innocent civilians that are caught up in this. These are populated villages that are near this, and the people there, they must feel trapped, It's awful. Very, very scary, and hopefully things will settle down. But the thing is that I think a lot of geopolitical analysts are concerned that this is going to be the conflict that pushes them over the edge and is going to spark another war, another total war, because this is some of the most intense fighting that's happened, and it's got no sign of abating. So that's the concern. They're worried it's just going to spiral and just end up as a complete war at this point. But we'll see. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. So those are the geopolitical events I wanted to discuss. I know it's nothing positive to really talk about, but, that's what's going on in the world right now, and that's just, I want to do my best to try to at least inform you guys as to what's going on. Especially, I think we know a lot about the US and the elections, but we don't really hear much about Armenia and Azerbaijan. But still, these are two countries with millions of people living there, and it's something I'm very concerned about, and it's sad to me that it's not really getting any attention at all. No one cares about it, at least here in the US. So I thought, since no one's talking about it, no one's explaining it, maybe you hear about it a tiny bit, right? You don't really know the full story, so I thought, I've been following this. Of course, I follow this stuff, very, very intently. I thought I would take the time to at least explain to you guys what's going on there, so at least you might be better informed about it. But a nasty conflict, very, very nasty. Hopefully it won't get any worse. That's all I can really say. So 2 other things I wanted to talk about. I have a short little update on shortwave radio that I guess I'll give right now, since there's not much to talk about, honestly. Because shortwave radio and international broadcasting, like I always say, is still a busy thing, and even though it doesn't really apply to many people, for those of you who do listen on shortwave and are interested in the medium, here's just a few updates on what's going on around the world with that. Just 2 things that I've really noticed, or 3 things, I guess. Number 1, if you do want to follow the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, unfortunately, neither of those countries have a station. Armenia does have a transmitter site near the capital, And I've actually had my broadcast transmitted from Armenia a couple times back in 2016. But they just lease the airtime out to different clients and different stations. They don't actually... There used to be a Radio Armenia, but they don't have it anymore. So they have transmitters, but they don't broadcast their own programming. They just kind of sell some airtime. I don't think Azerbaijan has had a station for years. But one station that is covering it, as one would expect, is the Voice of Turkey. So if you are interested, just look up their schedule online and tune into their English service. Listeners in North America can usually catch the English service of the Voice of Turkey, I believe at the time of 6 p.m. Eastern on the frequency of 9830 kilohertz. So again, that's 6 p.m. Eastern, 9830 kilohertz, that's to North America. They also have a broadcast later at night to North America on 7275 kilohertz, 7275 kilohertz, from 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, 7275 kilohertz, but they're broadcast direct from Turkey, very, very powerful 500 kilowatt transmitters from Turkey, so it usually gets a good signal in. Just understand, if you do listen to the Voice of Turkey, that the media coverage is going to be slanted. When you listen in and you hear updates on the conflict, it is going to be very, very, very pro-Azerbaijan. So just be wary of that. Don't expect unbiased news. You may hear also updates, from some of the more reputable broadcasters like the Voice of America, the BBC World Service, etc., who may have updates as well. But again, Turkey seems to be covering it most directly, but it's going to be biased again toward Azerbaijan, so just be aware of that. Two other things. There's going to be a new station setting up in Palau, which is an island in the Pacific, and it's going to be targeting, I believe, Asia. I don't know if it's something that many people would be very interested in, but it's a new station. It's going to be called Hope Radio. The first day of operation is going to be for November 1st. It's going to be religious broadcasts, I believe from studios and offices of a Christian church in Morgantown, West Virginia. They're going to have three 100 kilowatt transmitters, one beamed to China, one beamed to Korea, probably North Korea, I would imagine. They just say Korea. And then another beamed towards Southeast Asia. But I think it's just going to be religious programming. It doesn't seem like it's going to be much else, but if someone's interested in that, it looks like a religious station popping up to serve Asia. And then finally, this was interesting anyway. It was an interesting usage of the medium of shortwave, honestly. I don't know if by the time this show goes out, but there's apparently this new rock band from Switzerland called Brain 5. I guess that's spelled B-R-A-N-E, like brain, right? B-R-A-N-E-F-I-V-E, Brain 5, from Switzerland. And they released a single called Free the Animal in You, and they decided it's certainly a unique way to promote it, I'll tell you that. They said, we promoted it, of course, on all the usual music venues, the usual fare. But we also decided to buy some airtime from some of the international shortwave stations and broadcast the song, at different times for the next 2 weeks, all across Europe, North and South America. And they, set up, I guess, an email address for reception reports and feedback on the song. And it's really, I listened to it, it's like a 5-minute slot where they have an announcement at the beginning, they give out the email, and then they play the song. And, some people might be a fan of it, some probably won't be. I gave it a listen, because, I listen to a lot of, indie alternative rock, so hearing that that's the genre, I was interested. And, it was okay. It wasn't the best song I've ever heard, wasn't the worst either, but certainly had some decent sounds, and I wish them the best of luck. Either way, it was just a very interesting way to promote a new song. they bought a lot of airtime. I think it seems to me that they bought like, 40 or more airtime slots. I mean, like a huge amount. But I guess they figured, hey, let's try and get this song out to whoever we can. So it's right now it's broadcast at just random times from WRMI to listeners in North America, South America, and the Caribbean, and also on channel 292 for listeners in Europe. But again, it's just it's broadcast like 4 or 5 times each day on different frequencies each day. So it's you might stumble upon it. But Brain 5. That's the group. So it was just an interesting thing to see. Anyway, I've never seen a song get premiered exclusively via shortwave. By the band actually buying up airtime. On my radio broadcasts that I do 3 times a week on the shortwave, I take music requests, and there have been over the years a number of bands who have premiered songs on my show, which does go out on shortwave, but it's not like they are buying up the airtime to promote the song themselves. It's just they asked if I could play it, and I said, yeah, by all means, I'll happily do so. And, I'll share it with the audience worldwide through that. But it was interesting to see. Anyway, it was unique. So that's what's really going on there. Thankfully, no stations shut down, at least, which is good, right? That's good. Otherwise, I actually started having a problem with my radio, so I had to get another one. But the radio still works. It's just there were some issues that I can't really fix. So I'm just going to keep the old one as a backup, and then I bought the exact same thing, a Texan PL660 radio, because that's just the best one in my opinion. So I said, what the heck, I'm just going to buy another one, and put the other one that, again, has this issue where it's like it's generating this static from inside, and I did everything I could. It's just not fixing. It's not interference. It's some issue in the radio, and I took the whole thing apart, but didn't fix anything, really, so it's just had to get another one. Either way, it's not the end of the world, so that's just what's going on there. A final thing that I just wanted to talk about before we go into the mailbag portion. It was just a strange experience. I don't know what it was. I'm sure there's some sort of explanation to it, but it's never happened to me before in my life. And I still feel weird. Right now, it's been about a day since it happened, and I don't know, I still feel weird. I don't know what it was. I'm sure people will, say it was this or that, and I don't know. Maybe it was as I was sleeping, but it was how I woke up was in such an unusual, it's never happened to me before in my life. I don't know. I was researching it, and it seems like maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe it was some sort of panic attack or something that was just... But I've had those in my sleep before, that's the thing, and it had never been like this. But maybe it was some sort of panic attack in my sleep. Kind of matches up with, like, heart palpitations, but, maybe that kind of has to do with the panic attack, right? That could be. I don't know. But what happened, maybe it was just some sort of involuntary reflex that was just in that area. I don't know. But it was like around 11 p.m. last night. And I'd gotten a couple hours of sleep, and I remember I was having this very... I don't know if it was directly beforehand, but I remember the last dream that I had, and it was very, very, very mundane. It was not a scary dream. It was not a violent dream. It was not any sort of nightmare. Because the last couple times I remember waking up and having like some sort of severe anxiety, panic attack that made me feel like, I don't know, just, shaky and just awful for like a week, were these, ultra-realistic dreams that usually involved very bad things like death and all of these, murders and just gruesome things. And it feels so real, it kind of leaves this traumatic feeling onto you for a while. You know it wasn't real, but it's like physically, your body and even parts of your mind feel like it really happened, and you're kind of traumatized for a while. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't any of those types of dreams. It wasn't even a realistic dream. It was just one of those mundane, mediocre ones. I think I was sitting in some sort of seminar, and I don't know if this guy was from YouTube or some sort of marketing firm or whatever, but he was showing this presentation. It was like a PowerPoint presentation, and he was just talking about different types of videos and video categories on YouTube. And all I remember is that he had this black mustache, and he was wearing a black three-piece suit with a wing collar of all things. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting look. I don't see many people ever dressed like that. That was in my dream, as the guy giving the presentation, very well dressed. But he was just, I don't know, he was just showing, all right, these are videos, pertaining to educational content, and so this type of like a teaching video you would put in the education category, and this type of video you would put in the entertainment category. That was the dream. Boring, it wasn't anything I didn't already know. There was no secret to YouTube or anything. It was just like I was sitting in on a class or something. That was it. So that was the dream. And then the next thing I know, I'm jolted awake by this sort of, I don't know, type of force that I know it was generated internally, but it sure didn't feel like it. And it seemed to largely be centered like around, not my heart, because, when you look at where your heart is, right, that's more toward the center. Not quite the center of your chest, but more or less around there. But it was more, around the lung / rib cage. It still feels weird. I could put my hand right there. That's not where my heart is, There wasn't any pain, it's just this weird feeling. And the only way I could describe it was this force that felt so strong, I almost felt like my soul or whatever almost, popped out of my body. No exaggeration. It felt like I physically jerked. I was like, the only other way I could describe the type of feeling and the force behind it is like if you are, like, when you are sitting somewhere, let's say in the seat of a car, or if you're on like a ride in an amusement park, one or the other, let's just say in a car, you slam the brakes on as hard as you can, and obviously if it's so sudden, or if you've gotten in an accident and you come to a sudden stop, hitting something, whatever, that your body doesn't stop immediately. So you jerk and, the seatbelt holds you in, and it's like you didn't intend to move, but there's this force that's just pulling you this way, right? Because obviously you're moving, the car stops, you're still moving, and, there's that little bit of a difference there. Same thing if you are, let's say, on an amusement park ride or a roller coaster, and it makes a very quick turn, and you're in your seat, the forces and everything kind of could almost strongly shove you in a certain direction. You didn't move yourself that way, right? That's just the product of the situation. That's what it almost felt like. Like there was this force. Again, it seemed like it was strongest in that area, not quite near my heart. It wasn't my heart. There was no chest pain. There was none of that. It feels fine. Pulse is fine. All that's good. But that's just where it seemed centered, more or less around the lung / rib cage area. And it was like that degree of force. And I know for a fact, like in bed, I woke up and I legitimately, moved. But not only physically, but it felt like whatever, if there is anything, makes me, was almost moving as well. And it was like I was being just shoved with this incredible force, almost to the left a little bit. And it felt like almost if it had been a little stronger, almost felt like it was so strong that just what makes me, me would have just popped out of my body. It just felt like to that extent. And it didn't last long. It lasted maybe 1 second at most. But it was so powerful. It was unlike anything I've felt in that circumstance before. Now, some people, I believe, may think, I have an answer. That there's this type of sensation that occurs called a hypnic jerk, right? Where right when you're falling asleep, it just deals with this difference between the brain and the body, and it makes you feel like you're falling, and you'll get startled when you'll wake up. I've heard of that, and I've researched, and I've had that before, but this was nothing like that. There was no I did not feel like I was falling. Again, I felt like there was this external force that almost seemed to be like pushing me in this certain direction so hard, I don't know. I'm sure that there's a term and everything for it and many other things, again, because that's what woke me up. So, of course, you're still going to be, even if you're jolted awake and, you feel startled, you're still going to be a bit groggy. And, your perception might not be 100%, so I'm sure there's explanations. It might be, I don't know, something to the extent of maybe you had some sort of panic attack, for no reason in your sleep, and, I don't know, maybe it did cause some sort of heart palpitation or something. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just some sort of involuntary reflex. It just happened for one reason or another. And in this kind of half-awake state, you perceived it as a certain way that it may not necessarily have been. I don't know. Tried to research it as best I could, but it's just kind of like, The general consensus that I've gotten is just like, it's nothing serious. It's strange, certainly unique, in my case. But from what I've seen is that if there's no chest pain, no chest tightness, no shortness of breath, and you're still alive right now, then it's no big deal. So that's the understanding that I've gotten from it. But I don't know, that general area still feels a little weird, but I think it's because it almost adds credibility. What if it was like some sort of muscle spasm or something? And what it also could have been, theoretically, this is just my guess, ill-informed at that, mind you. Maybe it was some sort of muscle reflex, and, because that doesn't normally happen, it could be that. And then combined with, maybe I was startled by the feeling, I kind of had a little bit of a jump, because I was shocked by it, because I don't normally wake up to that. And that's what explained that sudden, jerk in that direction. That could be. That's a possibility. Maybe there's more to it. I don't know. It's interesting. It was interesting, but I mean, afterwards, one of the first things I did, I have this pulse oximeter that I keep near my bed. I took my pulse and everything, and it wasn't high. It was not high at all. It was pretty much just in line with what you would expect for a heart rate when you would wake up. Perfectly in line with that, so it was not like going crazy or anything. Throughout the day, it fluctuates a bit. It does that every single day, though, so everything else is fine, but there's been zero pain. Nothing since. And, I did nap subsequently, and that was only for a few hours, but, now that you mention it, I had only been asleep for a few hours then, too. I was only asleep for like 3 hours or so. And then, I was up after that, but then I went back to bed 8 hours later and got some more sleep. And, I slept fine. I fell back asleep, woke up fine, and here we are, so, nothing happened then. It's not like this happens every time I wake up. It hasn't happened any time since, so clearly also, in terms of lungs and stuff, I'm able to stand here and just talk like this just fine. I'm not coughing, not gasping for air. I don't know what it was. I don't know. One thing that, really does make me think, though, the overwhelming feeling that I felt at the time, like immediately during that 1 second, because it was scary, it's like you have this feeling and you are not in control. Like you have zero control over whatever happens and whatever's going to happen, right? There's nothing that you can do to stop it. At least in that situation. So, the one thought that I had, like in the immediate moment, was, look, and obviously it's an overreaction, but I thought, look, if this is it, But no worries, evidently I'm still here unless I am a ghost at this point and somehow I'm able to grab a microphone and do the show. I guess that's a very, very slim chance, but either way, there was that feeling initially, but secondly, it almost, just this feeling, where it felt like this almost little bit of a separation between body versus me, right? Almost, it makes you feel like your body is just a vessel, and that's it, one old but long-standing analogy that sometimes you hear is, it's like, your body is like a radio, and what makes you, you're like the signal, and, your body is just this, it's like a radio receiver. It's just honing in and picking up the signal, and, what makes you're your own entity. And it's just interesting, almost, that's what it really felt like, during that, even just that split second and subsequently, it felt like there's that, distinct separation between the two. Me, and then my body. It's just interesting. Very, very interesting experience. I'm not asking for answers, it's just something worth sharing. Just a unique experience. Either way. Never had that happen before, but so far so good, at least. I don't think it's anything ultra serious, because again, in this following day, I'm doing good. There have been days where I've felt 100 times worse, so I don't know, just strange. Strange is all. Well, with that, you're listening in to VORW Radio International. Coming up next is the Mailbag Show, so stay tuned for that. I think it's going to be a good one. Coming up next is the mailbag portion of the broadcast. The name is really self-explanatory. It is a place where we open up the email and we read listener letters. There is no set topic for this part of the show. It is a clean slate, and all we do is we just read whatever emails we read. It's just a place to read listener correspondence. This is highly interactive, so if you are listening in right now and you want an email featured on an upcoming broadcast, here's how you can write in. If you have any thoughts on the show, if you have any questions for me, if you have any topics you would like to hear discussed, if you read something interesting today or watched an interesting video, if you want to share an experience, share a story, or just have a blank slate to write whatever you want, any topics are welcome and any emails are welcome at vorwinfo@gmail.com. That's vorwinfo@gmail.com. That's vorwinfo@gmail.com. I know nowadays this show really gets out there, but as is true with radio and podcasts as well, many more people listen than write in, so the more emails, the merrier. You can keep it long or short. Every email is different, but the variability is really one of the best things about it. So don't hesitate to drop a line, and if you are feeling artistically inclined, if you're feeling a bit creative, for our viewers on YouTube, as you can see in the video, we feature fan art submitted by you, the listener, in every broadcast. Some of it is the thumbnail, and the rest is kind of scattered throughout the video. So if you are feeling like a little bit creative, you want to draw something or paint something or do digital art or whatever, you can be my guest and go ahead if that's what you want. And then if you want your fan art featured, I would be most certainly happy to do so. And because you put the time and effort into it, crediting you is the least I can do. Just send in the piece of fan art to VORWINFO@gmail.com. Either email the file to me, include it as an attachment, or upload it to a third-party image hosting site and send me the link. I'll download it and I'll do the rest of the legwork. And also let me know how you would like to be credited. I will credit you verbally at the beginning, and I will also credit you in writing in the description, so let me know if you would just like a name, if you would like a social media account promoted, etc., or if you would just like to remain anonymous. So if you are feeling again creative, feel free to make a piece of fan art and submit it. Without further ado, let's open the inbox and see what we can get to today. Alright, so now getting into the mailbag, right, especially, we have plenty to read, so thanks to everyone, because I know in the last show that I did, I said not a lot of emails came in, so a couple extra ones would be nice, and I sincerely thank everyone who did correspond. There's a wonderful selection of emails tonight, and we'll get to whatever we can get to. I can't guarantee, that I'll be able to get to every single email and piece of correspondence, but I'll certainly try. So with that, let's just start anywhere, right? Start anywhere. Let's see. Alright, well, how about this piece of correspondence coming in from an anonymous listener, writing, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on a particular topic that's been on my mind recently. A few years ago, I saw that you did a video about shoes, where you presented an interesting perspective about shoes, and I thought maybe you have a perspective on the following question. As you know, at the end of the day, most people remove their shoes once they get home after a long day. Some keep their socks on, and some, like me, remove their socks as well. One thing I noticed is that those who go barefoot at home tend to be people who come from recent immigrant families like I do, while those who keep their socks on at home tend to be in families who have been here for generations. Maybe it is a class thing in terms of where people come from, where it may be more acceptable to go barefoot in developing countries than in more developed countries. Have you thought about this, and do you have any thoughts on it in particular? Do you consider yourself to be in the socks at home crowd, or no socks at home crowd, or maybe it depends on the day? I'd be interested in getting your thoughts about this. Thanks for considering this question, again from an anonymous listener. So thanks for your question. It's an interesting topic. I have to say I appreciate it. I really do, because so many questions I get are about food. Not that really bothers me at all, but I'm not even a huge food person, I know I do the food reviews, but I eat, but I don't really spend most of my free time cooking or anything. I follow current events, I've been dreading, what's going to happen with the election. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I've been following what's going on between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But hey, that's what this show is for. The food can stay on the other channel. But again, it's just nice to talk about other things, and it's a good subject to start it off with. So again, thanks for I appreciate it. I really do. Gosh, socks or no socks? Well, considering that I don't have shoes on right now as I'm recording this, I'm looking down at my feet, and I do have socks on. I am inside. So I would have to put myself at the socks at home crowd. The reason, because I do take my shoes off, I always do that, but I always keep my socks on. And there is a reason, because there have been times where I have walked around inside barefoot, but that's rare, that's very rare. And I have a definitive preference for wearing socks indoors. Here's why. number one, my feet get cold extremely easily. All my extremities do. So, socks, there's different types of socks, right? The socks that I always wear are the, formal men's dress socks, right? And those are always on the thinner side, but those are what I always wear. But I do have some, thicker socks for, that I especially wear when I'm up in New York or whatnot, or on the off day that it's cold here in Florida. I'll wear those. Those are a bit fuzzier. But even the thinner socks, they even do a little bit to keep the feet warm, which is nice. So that's number one. Every little bit helps. Mark my words, it does. Secondly, as I'm walking around, there's a difference between walking on the floor in bare feet versus walking, on the floor with socks. Socks, to me, offer, number one, a little bit of a barrier between, let's say, any dust, if there's any crumbs or anything on the ground. Of course, I try my best to keep it clean, but nothing's perfect, right? It has that barrier right there. And number two, and most importantly, because I can always wash my feet, I don't care. It gives this little bit of a smoothness when I'm walking. I don't know, it's just smoother, it's quieter, and I like that. And I've worn socks indoors pretty much my entire life. I've never really been a barefoot person. So it's also just what I'm comfortable and familiar with. So I am a socks indoors person. No, I mean, my views on that, it's interesting that you mentioned maybe there is, between immigrant families versus otherwise. That's interesting. That's an interesting, because obviously, right, immigrant families, they do have traditions, and maybe that is a thing. I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't feel qualified to really comment on because I've never really thought about it, socks versus barefoot at home. That's interesting. But really, I mean, in the end, I don't care if you wear socks or if you don't. The only provision, I would say, is as long as your feet don't smell. As long as they're clean and they don't have any horrendous odor to them, I don't care, wear socks or don't. It doesn't matter to me. So, that's what it comes down to. But I mean, there have been instances, another reason, and I guess this kind of goes into the, the barrier type of argument that I mentioned earlier. One thing is that when I go barefoot, there has been a time where I've almost gotten like a splinter or something in the bottom of my foot more than once, and I'll have to pick it out with a pair of tweezers, and it hurts. And when I wear socks, it never happens. So it's just, there's just reasons why I wear what I wear, I suppose. All right, thanks again for writing in. Next email comes in from Vegas Jesse. Says, love the show. I listen religiously and have been meaning to ask you a few questions. You mentioned a couple times that you could see yourself relocating to Las Vegas. As a person who lives in Vegas, I think you'd love it here. Most people overestimate the heat, and aside from a couple months per year, the weather is perfect every day. Your concern about the dryness here may hold true to some degree, but I personally love it. I'm wondering if you'd go into more detail about what it is that draws you into Vegas. You don't strike me as the type to run down the strip and blow a bunch of money on the typical Vegas vacations. I'm curious what you see in Vegas. So number one, to get to your first question, because you also have another one, and the second question I'm going to get to, I really like it, so it's a good email, thank you. So, the thing that I like about Vegas, number one, is that it's one of the few places, at least in the United States, that in many cases, now I don't know if this is true anymore, right? Because you have the real Las Vegas, and then you have, the glamorized version of it, which isn't always up to expectations. So, I mean, if anyone in Las Vegas wants to clarify this, it'd be interesting. But one of the reasons, at least from what I've seen, why I like it is because I am a night person. And so many places around this country nowadays are not even open late at night or 24 hours. They all shut down earlier and earlier and earlier. And, with COVID and everything, that seems to be the nail in the coffin for a lot of it. Can't even go to the supermarket at night anymore, It's like they tell you, because of COVID-19, we have to reduce our hours, and somehow it's safer to, cut our hours by 50% and pack everyone in this shorter span of time, right? I don't know. It's just frustrating. But Vegas seems to be one of the last places that seems at least to cater to, more nocturnal individuals, right? So that's one thing, that many, many places seem to be open at night. The other thing is that the gambling and everything doesn't bother me. Honestly, gambling in some cases can really be a skill. Some people, I think they have their certain views, but in the end, even if I myself am not a gambler, it doesn't mean that I have any sort of inherent disdain for it. Again, some of the people who can, who know what they're doing, they're brilliant. They're brilliant individuals, and a lot of thought goes into it. Don't get me wrong. But, one thing that's kind of funny, almost in a way stock market, the stock market is almost gambling in a sense. But, even then, like, I'm interested still in some of the, it's not really gambling, but, the betting markets for current events and politics, some sites that do that. That's certainly interesting to follow, I'll tell you that. But I mean, in the end, there's a number of things about Vegas that I like. Not just focusing even on the stereotypical, Vegas Strip and whatnot, but the city in general. It's something that I have researched, and there's just an appeal to it. That's all. It's certainly a place I've considered it at one point or another. Now, your second question is also a good one. Something I've certainly thought about. I was thinking about it today, actually. You're right. You've mentioned a couple times in recent shows that we'd likely be in the midst of a world war without social media, or I meant civil war. You wrote world war, but it was civil war that I was talking about. Continuing midst of a civil war without social media to pacify the masses. This surprised me at first because I see social media as intensifying every conflict. After considering your view, I'm not sure what to think anymore. What do you think about social media as an agitator rather than a pacifier? Anyway, have a good one from Vegas, Jesse. All right, thanks for writing in. Good questions. So, here's my viewpoint on social media. Now, I mentioned this earlier in the show, but I'll say it again. I think regardless of my own viewpoint of social media, the boiling point is going to come, I believe, with the election. And regardless of who wins, I think that there will 100% be riots in many major cities. There will be deaths, there will be shootings, people are going to run each other over with their cars, and there will be a death toll, 100%. You can't change my mind on that. There's going to be violence on election night, and on the days preceding, probably more arrests than you can count, lots of arson, lots of looting, all that stuff. So, if I were you, unless you're understanding of the repercussions, I recommend, if you want to vote, by all means go ahead, and then stay in. Stay in and stay safe. That's my viewpoint, because it's going to be a bloodbath, in the literal sense. On and around Election Day. I see it that way. It's controversial, but you can't change my mind on that. So it's all going down there. Not a civil war, though. Not a civil war. I don't know how many deaths, might ensue. It's irresponsible to even draw a number to that. But it's not going to be house to house or anything. You're not going to have Either, an armed militia or some group of rioters going door to door, let me see your voter registration, and then they'll haul you out if you're not their political party and they'll shoot you, that's not going to happen. Instead, I think you're just going to have, the protests that are going to devolve into riots, and you're going to have the counter-protesters, and that's where it's going to get messy, So that's what I see happening. And because it's such a huge event, this is one of the cases that, despite I feel social media being a pacification, a tool for pacification of the society, I think it's just too big an event for those, for those powers, if you want to say, of social media to even work. So you might say, right, because social media can certainly be an agitator, why do I see it as a pacifier in some ways? And then, views on it as it being an agitator and a pacifier, vice versa. The reason why I see it as it is, and why I think maybe we would be in a civil war, at least to some extent, if it weren't for social media, is because, now, my view of society and humanity is that in some cases, I think, at least here in the United States, and even in other parts of the world, there is a lot of laziness in certain ways. Now, you can have people who are extremely hard-working in some ways and are lazy in others, right? You can have individuals who may, be industrious individuals, at their 9-to-5 job. They do it better than anyone else. They're efficient, they really care. But then their commitments in their personal lives are lacking. Vice versa, and in different ways, right? So when people say lazy, I don't mean it as a generalization. I think in some ways, a lot of individuals are lazy. And sometimes that's a good thing. I know that you don't really hear that a lot. But I really think, knowing how things are nowadays, it is a good thing, right? Social media, I think, allows people to go online, blow off steam, maybe make empty threats. I disagree with doing that, but people do it anyway. And because they're lazy, they never follow through with them. See, that's why I'm saying laziness in some cases is good. You have these people that say they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Are they really? No, of course they're not going to. They talk the talk, they're never going to walk the walk, but that's a good thing. In many of those cases, you don't want people to follow through with the things that they're saying. Because, they're angry, they're frustrated, they feel like they could do this, maybe they want to, a part of them at least wants to, but they have this convenient outlet, such as Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is, and they can vent it off. In their mind, they can kind of have this illusion that they're actually going to go out and commit this atrocity, and then everything's back to normal. They blow off enough steam, they're not actually going to go and do anything, and then, they go back to daily life, right? Go back to watching whatever. And life goes on, and they've lived to see another day, and so have the other people on the end of their fury. Now, it's not always about hurting or killing other people, but if it weren't for social media, if these platforms didn't exist, and if people, let's say, congregated in the old school town square and spoke face-to-face, and they still harbored such sentiments, such feelings, such vitriol, such anger, such animosity, I don't think things would end the same way. I think you would see a lot more fights, a lot more shootings, a lot more random acts of violence. And I think as a result, right, we would be in a much worse situation. So, I wish that the agitation never existed, to begin with. But it's the lesser of two evils. I would rather have people pound away at their keyboards or their phones or their screens and say these things online as opposed to physically going out and doing them. There is a big difference between saying versus doing, right? And as a result, that's why I feel social media, yes, it allows for the propagation of a lot of terrible, terrible things that are bringing us down as a society. But at the same time, right, the flip side of that coin, as I said, I think it's the lesser of two evils. Yes, it's allowing for the spread of this hatred, this vitriol coming from all different directions, but at least it's not letting that materialize in the physical sense, I think it's as much as it would otherwise do. So that's my viewpoint. I guess that kind of answered the other question, what do I think of it as an agitator? I think that's terrible too. But it's the lesser of two evils. I would rather social media exist and serve as an agitator than not exist and have people constantly beating the living daylights out of each other in the streets and, leading to a tremendous loss of life. But again, in some cases, right, despite, this is not foolproof. I'm just saying, you still have riots, right? You still have shootings. You still have, the growing divide. And all of that still happens. But I just think the numbers of deaths and injuries and all of that stuff would be higher if it weren't for social media. It's not a universal view, but that's my thought. But again, I think election night, it's such a big event, and of course it's such a contentious issue, that this is going to be one of those instances where, those pacification powers of social media are going to be overwhelmed one way or another. Next up, we have an email coming in from Dylan in Portland, Oregon, from a very serious topic onto more laid back. Hope you're having a great day, he writes. I love watching the food reviews and listening to the podcast every time it comes out. My question is, ever since you reviewed the Dairy Queen bacon cheeseburger, you said the ice cream was poorly done. What do you mean, and can you explain why you don't like Dairy Queen's food? How come you haven't reviewed their ice cream or blizzards? Well, thanks, Dylan. I don't have an answer for you. I wish I did. But that review, I think, was 4 years ago now. And I haven't had Dairy Queen much in the meantime. I've had a few things and it was done okay, but I can't... I wish I could, but I just can't pick my brain back to then and, like an encyclopedia, be able to tell you why I didn't like the ice cream on that day. I remember the review, but I don't even remember what it was that I liked or didn't like about it, because it was just so far back, and there's been so many videos since then, but I just remember especially I didn't like the burger, I don't think. But I don't know what I was really saying about the ice cream. I wish I could tell you, and I'm sorry that I can't, but that's my honest answer. I think it would be dishonest to, try and make something up and say, well, I think it was because of this, when I really have no idea what I'm talking about. So, thanks for writing in anyway, and I appreciate your listenership. Next email comes in from Braden with a suggestion. Please do a Halloween-based podcast on paranormal experiences like last year. That episode is one of my favorites, and I love theme-based episodes about supernatural experiences and conspiracies. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You could count it in. That's going to happen. Absolutely going to happen. There have actually been a couple requests for that. I think there was another email that came in too, about the same exact thing. Just suggesting, can you do a Halloween show? Yeah, here we go, from Brooke, who also wrote, I was curious if you were planning on doing a special podcast like you did last year, where you had listeners share their spooky stories. I most certainly will. Absolutely. And those aren't the only 2 emails suggesting that I do. There's been many, many more. I'll be happy to. I know it's kind of like what Coast to Coast AM does, but I don't think I'm stepping on anyone's toes with this. It's not illegal to make a show where people share ghost stories, and it's all good anyway. So, yeah, there's going to be one. It'll be nice anyway, the quiet before the storm, right? That'll be a couple days after Halloween. I think it'll be a break we all kind of need. But I'll do this show, and then maybe I'll do another one or something in the meantime. Then it'll be a special broadcast, so I'm not going to promote it yet. That'll be the next one that I do. I'll promote it. But you can most certainly anticipate that coming up on Halloween, I will do a special paranormal show. And I hope it'll be a lot of fun, where listeners can submit any spooky stories or anything related to the paranormal, honestly, in writing or via audio. We are going to open that up, even if it's to the consternation of some. I am. It'll be fun, though. It'll be a lot of fun, and I hope it's an enjoyable show. So that's going to happen. Next email comes in from Paul in Liverpool, UK. Dear VORW, as a forward, I'd like to thank you for your podcasts and radio. It's been a companion to me during bouts of ill health, and now a companion during my working day as a beekeeper's apprentice. I truly appreciate the work and effort you put into the broadcasts. Continuing as a podcast topic, I'd be interested in hearing your opinions and, if any, experience with the popular comic strip and franchise of Garfield. Garfield has an extremely deep history due to how long it's been in production, 1978 till this very day. I'd like to hear if what you have to say about this popular cartoon feline who loves lasagna. Have you read any comic strips in newspapers or books? Did you ever watch Garfield on TV or film? Do you think the medium of newspaper will die out in your lifetime, or will it continue as a format for the foreseeable future? I'd love to hear what you have to say. Many thanks from Paul, Liverpool, UK. So, well, thank you for writing in. Garfield, another interesting topic, certainly one I've never been asked about before. Number one, have I ever read the comic strips in newspapers? I have. I've read Garfield in the, I always call it the funny papers, in the comic strips in the newspaper. Especially when I was young, I would. But that was actually kind of how I first experienced Garfield. It wasn't really my favorite comic, to tell you the truth, but I would always give it a look. I would always check it out every Saturday. That's when I would get the newspaper. And that's how I would see it in the local paper. I never really watched Garfield on TV or film. I know once or twice when I was young, but it hasn't really been, I guess, the primary means of consumption of Garfield content. So I am not an avid Garfield fan. It's not like I have a giant stuffed Garfield in the corner right now that's just, staring at me, and, you feel like it's going to come to life any second. I don't. I own no Garfield memorabilia or anything, but I have no disdain for it either. The other question you wrote in regards to newspapers is an interesting one. People have been saying that newspapers are dying for the last few decades. Same as they've been saying about shortwave radio, and same as what's said for AM radio too. Newspapers in the traditional sense, right? We're going to talk about print. Newspapers are not as popular as they once were. But they are still there, they're still hanging on, and people still know what they are. People still read newspapers. So, it's still going to exist for a while. I think at least to some extent, in my lifetime, I think newspapers will still be around, although I would guarantee they wouldn't be as popular, even as they are now. But I think they would still be around. I think at least for the next few decades, newspapers are still going to exist. Their numbers might get fewer and fewer, but I think they will still remain popular. First with, the older demographics, but then maybe as, as they kind of die out, it may be popular still, among a small number of people who have a niche interest in that means of, information, receiving information, old school paper, books, etc. Just like how, now. You had individuals who thought a decade ago, once the iPad and the Kindle and all that stuff, oh, books are done for, oh, young people are just going to use that. And no, there's still plenty of people, even in younger demographics, who still use, who still use a regular hardcover or paperback book, the old-fashioned way. The alternatives exist, but there's going to be a percentage of people who prefer to consume the media that way, and others who prefer to do so the more traditional way. For instance, and I think one testimony to that is shortwave radio. Yes, it's nowhere near as popular as it was 20 years ago, but the fact that it still exists and is still utilized, even to this day, in developed countries, with the internet and smartphones and everything, I think that's a testament to that. That so-called legacy media can still survive, even when, the replacement is fully integrated into society. The BBC World Service, they were talking about how they still believe that they have, I think on shortwave, close to 50 million listeners. I'd say that's still a pretty relevant medium to me if that many people are still listening. Obviously with the internet, many don't have use for it anymore, but there's enough people still listening even in 2020 that it still has relevance. It still does. And I think that's kind of the road that, maybe newspapers will go down eventually. Won't be used as much, but it'll hang on surprisingly long. Longer than people would ever think. And I remember looking through these old posts from news groups, I think it was, from the late 90s, early 2000s about shortwave radio. And I was seeing posts from, 2000, people saying, oh, it's going to be dead in 5 years, it's going to be dead in 10 years, it's going to be dead in 20 years. Well, here we are 20 years later, and it's still hanging on. Not what it used to be, but it sure isn't dead, I'll tell you that. So, I don't know, I think it's going to hang on. I think newspapers will hang on. If something as obscure as shortwave radio manages to still exist, then newspapers most certainly will. They're not going to be disappearing anytime soon. Many more topics to discuss. Eli checks in. I hope you're doing well. My favorite fast food restaurant is Pollo Tropical, and since I've heard you mention in videos before that you're in Florida, you must have had it before. Do you ever think you'll do a video for something from Pollo Tropical, or have you avoided it so far because it wouldn't relate to viewers outside of Florida? Also, I drive often for work and listen to a lot of podcasts, mostly Stuff You Should Know and a few others. I saw recently that your VORW podcast is also on Spotify, so I downloaded a few episodes, listened to the most recent one from the 12th, and I enjoyed it. I like that you take your time to think and talk about things instead of rushing through like so many shows do. Regarding what you were talking about, a third through the show, with the bigger media outlets being so biased, you should check out PBS NewsHour on YouTube. I think they do a decent job of presenting in a nonpartisan way. Best wishes from Eli. Thanks, Eli, for writing in. Thanks for tuning in on the road as well. And PBS NewsHour, I'll check them out. So thanks for the suggestion there. Pollo Tropical. Oh yeah, I've been there. I have items that I like. Personally, let's look them up. Pollo Tropical. I think they are mostly Florida. Yeah, it's a Miami-based Florida restaurant chain specializing in cuisine of the Caribbean. It was founded in 1988. Yeah, best known for marinated and grilled chicken, in various sides, including black beans, rice, corn, casserole, and more. There's 141 locations in the United States. Let's see where they're located. Are they all just in Florida? Let's see. They own and operate more than 140 locations throughout Florida, plus 5 licensed restaurants on college campuses and 32 franchise locations throughout the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and Puerto Rico. Okay. Yeah, so they're mostly a Florida chain. Though what's interesting is that on the Wikipedia page, the picture of them that they used was from a location in Georgia, so that's just why I'm curious. I don't know. Who knows? They are where they are, but they're mostly in Florida, I suppose. That's it. That's what we've established. Now, that is a thing, because, right, there are lots of people in Florida, and I know there's lots of viewers and listeners from here, but, yeah, in terms of general applicability, given the nature of the main YouTube channel, it would be tricky, but, I do like Pollo Tropical. I'll go there. I like the different sauces that they have. I like the chicken, they certainly do that really good. You always go for the chicken if you're there. Personally, I think that's just what I think they do best. It's just really good. But I don't know, maybe for the fun of it, I'll squeeze a review in somehow, sneak it in, Maybe I will. I did review the Publix sub, but Publix is not only in Florida. They do have locations across the Southeast. But, I don't know. Maybe at some point I'll get a review for Pollo Tropical in. I doubt by the numbers it would do very good, but like I said, maybe I'll find a way to sneak it in somehow. I don't know. They're a good chain, though, and certainly they make a fine product, I will say that. If you're ever in Florida and you have the chance, try it out. Don't expect gourmet food, but for what it is, it's good. I recommend them. So thanks for writing in, Eli. Next email. I'm Justin. I'm a subscriber to the YouTube channel. I like the reviews, but I think you're missing a huge opportunity. You have the looks and voice to do a themed YouTube segment. What I'm referring to is reading old newspapers, even sports from the 30s to 50s in black and white video, or radio/podcasts. Your viewership and subscribers would increase substantially, and it would almost be an ASMR segment for some. You have a lot of talent, just a thought, thanks. Now, thanks for the suggestion. The one thing, and it's very paradoxical to a lot of people, and I think some people expect me to be this way, and then it turns out that I'm not, and then they hate my guts as a result. It's happened more times than you could count for some weird reason. Is that, I am not one of those people that is, 1930s everything, 1950s everything, this and that. I'm not one of those, total vintage people. I'm just, I guess, this really, really weird blend of I'm okay living in the present. There's a lot of things I hate about this world, but at the same time, I know that I'm really powerless to do anything about it, so, may as well just live in it. But I also do have a presence, but I also do have a preference for many things in the past, such as, old school radio, the way, I dress, etc. But at the same time, I don't apply these things to anyone but myself. I don't care if you wear, jeans and a t-shirt and never listen to the radio for your entire life, I don't care. Live your life, just don't hurt anyone. Don't harm anyone. Be a good person. So, I'm just not one of those people that's like, retro everything. Again, there's lots of things from the past that I listen to, but I kind of just blend it all together. Plus, a lot of the eras that I'm interested in totally conflict with one another. The suits that I wear are mostly 1980s, 1990s. It's actually not 40s and 50s like people think. It's 1980s and 90s that I wear. But my hairstyle is largely probably a 1930s or even 20s type of hairstyle. Most of the music I listen to is, 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then some early mid-2000s stuff. I enjoy shortwave radio, which is, granted, old school, but all the broadcasts I listen to are all new. So I'm just not one of those people, I guess, that I would just worry, if I do that, it would give the impression of me on the YouTube, which is not accurate. And that's my concern. It's like, I have many vintage, I guess, interests, but I am not, the guy living in 1950 or something. You see my concern there, just that would be my worry. But then, you see, well, maybe that's better than what we've already got, I just sit there and, I'm the guy that feeds his face every now and then, and that's what we've got. But I don't know. I just don't see that as this being something that overly appeals to me, but I appreciate that you suggested it. And thank you once again, though. Next email comes in from Josie. Hi, I just got to the part on your last podcast where you spoke about no sleep stories on Reddit, which, to be honest, I'm not too familiar with, but I was wondering, because of this, if you ever listened to or have read creepypastas before. I used to listen to them all the time on YouTube, which, weirdly enough, helped me through my depression sometimes. They just made me feel comforted in some strange way. Would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for reading. Well, thanks for writing in. I know you're a regular listener to the radio broadcasts, too. Creepypastas. I certainly have. Absolutely. What I did is I kind of started with creepypastas and then moved to the no sleep stories, but they're really the exact same thing. So I know there's different names for them, but I would just think of them that they are exactly the same in terms largely of format and subject matter, etc. Really, I've just, they're so similar that yes, absolutely, that's how I started off. And then again, I moved to no sleep, which again is very hit or miss. But I think the most famous creepypasta is Slender Man, which, is... I was never the biggest fan of Slender Man. There are so many Slender Man stories and offshoots that I certainly have read some. Let's see what else. I'm looking at this site, not that I ever use it, but I just Googled, most popular creepypastas. And one of those generic articles comes up from, it says Mashable.com. It says 17 terrifying creepypastas that are guaranteed to keep you up at night. So I'm going through the list. I'm seeing if I've read any of them. So number 1 was Slender Man. Number 2, Candle Cove. I've read that one. Robert the Doll, didn't read that one. The Goat Man story, I did read that one. That was, I think that originated on 4chan. But I read that one. It's from X. The Russian Sleep Experiment, that was a famous one right there. Jeff the Killer, I never read that one. That seemed to have mixed reviews. Ben Drowned, I read that one. Persuaded, haven't heard of that one. Smile Dog, I don't think I read that one, but who knows. No End House, I read that one. Psychosis, I read that one. Doors sounds familiar, but I don't think so. Gateway of the Mind, I read that one. The Rake, I read that one. Lavender Town Syndrome, haven't heard of that one. The Expressionless, I'm pretty sure I heard that. I think I read that one. That seems to ring a bell. So that was all 17, so you could see a majority of them I have read. I guess I'm fairly well versed in the world of creepypastas and all that stuff. I've read so much of this stuff, believe me, it amounts in the hundreds and hundreds of stories, and But as a result, it's... People say what they say about these things, but in the end, I enjoy it because I'm still staying active, It's still reading. It's still reading, It's still good. Still good, I think, for at least one's literacy. It's always good to read. Read stories, short stories, full-blown novels, whatever they are. I think it's still good to keep active with that. Writing, too, is important. But I enjoy it because it's a mixed bag. And personally, the one thing that I like, that some people do, some people don't, is that it is from largely non-established authors. It's not from some big name, so you never know what you're really going to get. And that's what I like. I like that it really is almost like, pulling the slots. You're sometimes going to get a good story, a very poorly written one, but every now and then, despite the fact that most of them are decent stories, every now and then you find this diamond in the rough that's just incredible, and it's just on a whole nother level, and it's just this hidden gem. So, there was one that I found the other day, kind of like that. I liked the person's style, and I just looked them up, and I read everything they wrote, since 2012. They were just that good of an author. Now that I mentioned that, I forgot their name, but you know what I'm saying. Sometimes you just find some really good stuff out there, but you'd never know. You think, oh, these are all just amateur, none of it's going to be good. Nonsense. There's some brilliant stuff out there. Alright, we've got an email coming in next from, just a fan. Suggested a couple topics, and said, maybe talk about cloning pets, Neuralink, quantum mechanics, etc. I think this would be awesome subjects to discuss. Take care, Reviewbrah. I keep you in my prayers as far as your safety is concerned, since that fall was a major life changer for you. Without health, there is little quality of life, and I also pray for your prosperity and self-judgment to be as you wish. So thank you sincerely for your kind words, for your thoughts, and for your prayers as well. As for your topics, I could discuss two of them. Quantum mechanics, count me out there. I wish I could. I wish I had the mind to discuss it, but I don't. So I'm sorry. I know that might be interesting, but I can't. If I did, I would sound like a bumbling idiot, which granted I am in that field. There's no denying that. There's no harm in saying that, because that's the truth. Now, Neuralink is, of those three, one that does... It's interesting to me, it's the invention at least peddled by Elon Musk. It was founded in July 2016. So Neuralink, it's the Neuralink Corporation, and it's a neurotechnology company founded by Elon Musk and others, developing implantable brain-machine interfaces. Alright, so it's an idea, I suppose, that it could have, the so-called chip in your brain that would almost, give you enhanced maybe mental capabilities. At least it would be like a computer in your mind, and you could be connected with your thoughts. I understand all of the possibilities that lie in Neuralink, and I know that it could possibly be good, but I am not a supporter of it because it's something that goes too far in my opinion. I think, and this is my own personal view, we already sacrifice enough of ourselves to technology, to the internet. We give away all of our privacy, practically everything we've got. Sometimes I feel like the only safe place, where we can truly not have to worry about any of that is in our own minds. In our own heads. No one can really get you there yet. But with Neuralink, you're sacrificing that too, and then there's nothing. There's nothing. I know that people will argue, well, this can be a tremendous tool for good. I get that. But look at the flip side of the coin. I mean, think of all the possibilities there also. Can people be hacked? Is everything you think going to be available for others to see? Do you want that? Everything you've ever thought. Every doubt, every question, every thought, pure or otherwise. Do you really want that for the world to see? For people to blackmail? For people to read? And then the prospect... That was strange. The program that I used to record this kind of freezed up for a bit and almost shut down and crashed as I was going on. Maybe they are listening. Probably are. And if they are, good, then let them hear it. And let them know that at least there's one person out there that does have at least mixed views and mixed feelings about the whole thing. Because, as I was saying, then you examine at least the prospect of control. Not just of any privacy you could ever hope for gone, but control. Now granted, would be technology beyond our understanding, but what if, in the traditional sense that something could be hacked, what if they allowed for that, the Neuralink chip or whatever, however it ends up being developed, to be hacked as well? Do you really want... Now someone can control you. You think mind control isn't real? Well, it is now. At least in that form. Imagine, it might be something along the lines of, intrusive thoughts. It would literally be to the extent of, having almost this type of schizophrenia initiated in you by a third party that's going to put these, thoughts and voices and notions into your head that you did not come up with at all, or ever wanted to think, and it could use that to try to control you in a sense. Or it would get even worse. It wouldn't just be things kind of being thrown at you and forcefully told to you. It would literally make you think and believe that without your control. All of a sudden, they want to use you to carry out a murder. Well, fine. Hack it, control them, get them to go do that, and they will. The amount of terrorist groups and opposing governments that would have a field day with such a thing. You know what they would do? They would see such an invention and they would laugh. They would laugh and they'd say, I can't believe people are willingly doing this. That's what they would think. Now, maybe it's not as advanced as that, but that's a worry that I have. They do that, you're nothing. To me, that's it. It's a horrifying, horrifying thought. And it's just something that I'm not comfortable with. If someone really wants to go ahead with it, that's on them. But anyone who goes ahead and does that has to understand the risks. That's all that I could say. They have to understand what they're getting themselves into and that it may very well be a permanent, life-changing thing. Regardless, it would. So I guess the way I see it is more of like a glass half empty type of thing. More along the lines of, instead of thinking this is the best thing ever, I think, oh my gosh, this is dreadful. Because it could be used for this, this, and this. That's my fear. Now, thanks for writing in. Alright, next email comes in from Josh in Missouri. Hello, John. Thanks for having me on the air. I'm a long-time listener of the show, and you're an integral part of my morning routine. Thank you for all that you do, and I encourage you to continue making great content. I know you're a fan of paranormal interests, and I thought you might find this story intriguing. A few years ago, I was out walking my dog in the late night. I live in the countryside, where there's no light pollution, so I can see the night sky very clearly. I looked up and saw two bright lights traveling in a vertical formation fairly quickly across the sky. Then suddenly, they came to a dead stop. They froze for a moment and started to dart around rapidly in seemingly random directions, with one following the other as if they were playing a wild game of tag. They did this for about 8 seconds, then froze once more, and then they started to chase each other in a spiral pattern around and around until they reached the center, at which point the two lights shot off into the distance at an impossible speed and vanished. I was so troubled by what I saw, what I had just seen, that I quickly rushed my dog back into my house and didn't come back out for the rest of the night. I still have no idea what I had witnessed, but it was quite unlike anything I had seen before. So thank you, Josh, for writing in and for sharing your UFO experience. UFOs are one of those fascinating topics, and honestly, my view on UFOs has actually changed a little bit over the last few weeks and months. I'd been giving more and more thought to it, and I was thinking about it, thinking about the universe, etc. I'll say this, while I still have my doubts, and I think many of the encounters might be experimental aircrafts, I am more of a believer, in legitimate aliens than I was, even a few weeks or months ago. I'll tell you that. Some things, I don't know, you just gotta read into it. And then you could change your mind, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, the more I see, the more credibility at least certain, more extraterrestrial explanations have. Not too much, but just, some things, it makes you think. That's what I'll say. I think many encounters, though, are either sightings that are just, a misunderstanding in a way, or it's just experimental aircraft, but there's certain ones that, I don't know, and certain individuals, too, that is making me ask and question otherwise. So, I know even since the last show I did about UFOs, my own attitude has changed, and there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. Nothing wrong with that. It's an interesting experience that you share. You mentioned that the sky, number one, was clear, right? You're in an area with minimal light pollution, and for a fact, what you saw. You know what you saw. I think sometimes I always find it a little offensive when people, they try to doubt what the individual witnessed. Think of it this way, right? Crystal clear with 100% confidence that what you saw that night was not a normal airplane, at the very least. Was it otherworldly? Right, that's where the question comes in. But at least what you saw wasn't normal. And it would be like, it was probably just a helicopter flying around or something. Right, imagine if someone said, you didn't see that, it was just a helicopter. You'd think to yourself, what are you? I know what I saw, and that was no helicopter, right? So, I would think that the possibility would largely be that it's probably some sort of advanced sort of spy plane. It may not be even controlled by anyone. It may be some sort of super advanced, what I would think is maybe some sort of spy drone, perhaps. And this is just going off of what given that some of the lights might have seemed smaller and very quick moving, could move at extremely high speeds. Maybe they can join together again and can branch off. It would be probably good surveillance. That's a possibility. Could be some sort of experimental type of either drone or, spy plane or whatever. Right? That's a good possibility. But then there's still that slim, but before I would say almost no chance, but now I would say slim chance. Maybe it is something out there checking us out. What do we know? Yeah, who's to say? Who's to say? I guarantee there's a lot to this world that we still don't fully understand. And that's the thing. I know if you come across as a skeptic, people will always look at you, at least by and large in society, as more composed, more intelligent, more put together, more reasonable, more sensible, etc. But in some ways, it's always good to have healthy skepticism. By all means, don't just dive in headfirst to every last thing, because there's lots of falsehoods out there in this world that people try to peddle as the truth. You see so much of that. So healthy skepticism, here's what I always advise. I advise having healthy skepticism and critical thought. What I wish for individuals as a means of thinking is to ask questions and look at things critically. In your own mind. You don't even have to ask other people this, but just ask yourself. Go through this thought process. You see something that doesn't really add up. Whatever that is, be that strange lights in the sky, you think you saw the Loch Ness Monster swimming around in the river in front of your apartment, right? Thought you saw a Bigfoot, or it could be much more, much more commonplace events. What is some official saying, right? What is a politician saying, or a public figure saying? What are people doing, right? Ask yourself questions, say, especially how and why, and examine it. Don't hesitate to even ask yourself, the typical who, what, when, where, why, how questions, but examine the possibilities, the likelihoods of different things. Think freely, think critically, and think for yourself, most importantly. A lot of people don't like that. They want you to think one way or another. I disagree. Make up your own mind. And if that aligns with certain views, then that's what it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But just be yourself. Retain that individuality. It's the most important thing we've got. But I think there are some UFO experiences where, it's clear no one has asked themselves or really anyone else any questions, and they jump aboard the extraterrestrial bandwagon without hesitation, only to kind of look foolish in the meantime. There was one instance a couple weeks ago, I think, and I believe it was in New Jersey, where there was this massive spike in UFO increases, being posted all across social media, on Twitter. People were saying, holy, bleepity bleep, look at this is a flying saucer, I can't believe it, I'm seeing it right now, it's hovering there, over, wherever it was, maybe Newark, New Jersey or something. What did it turn out to be? It turned out to be the Goodyear blimp. It was just an airship with the, the fluorescent sign on it for advertising, and everyone looked at it and they thought it was a UFO. Not an airship or anything, it was a UFO, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh. You could even just go on, those, a site like Flight Radar 24, and you'll see the transponders on, you can see some of these things. It's just mistaken identity, and sometimes just asking simple questions could almost almost solve that. Either it's the Goodyear blimp, or I guess the aliens, got a sweet brand deal. One or the other, I don't know. Maybe they really like the product, who's to say? Well, thanks again for writing in. Really enjoyed the encounter that you shared. Thank you again, Josh, over there in Missouri. Feedback is welcome. VORWINFO@gmail.com. That's VORWINFO@gmail.com. So feel free to correspond. Be great to hear from you. All right, we have many more emails to get to, so let's continue with our reading of them. Let's pick the next one. Let's go right here. And I think this goes along with some of the suggestions that we've had previously, so I'll just read it, but I think the answer we already know. Benjamin just wanted to write in and says he would love for another show dedicated to the paranormal. So thank you, Benjamin, listening in via SoundCloud, but also on Spotify as well. So absolutely, there will be the Halloween broadcast. No matter what happens, we will do it. So stay tuned for that. There will be another one. Next email comes in from Victor. Hello, I discovered your channel this week and have been binge-watching both of the channels. Definitely one of my favorite YouTube discoveries in 2020. Keep up the great content you've been creating. A couple of questions and suggestions. So, you sent a list of 9 questions, and we'll just pick and choose. I'll try to get to at least 3 or 4. Number 1, what are your thoughts on formal hats? Do you wear any? I am a big fan of the pork pie hat. I have a summer hat and a winter hat. So, first and foremost, hats. I am not a big hat wearer, admittedly, although I do own hats. So don't think that, I have some sort of disdain for hats. I just don't wear them because, I don't know. I theoretically could, I don't mind them. But sometimes, here's the thing, sometimes I think hats, in certain cases, can attract more attention, and I don't want that. I don't want any eyes on me. I already get enough people that look at me because I dress the way that I do. Sometimes I think the hat accentuates that. So, that's not really... But, in times, I will wear a hat to get the sun out of my face, because I don't want to get a sunburn or anything. And for that, I have a Panama hat. So that is a hat that I do wear. If I ever am out in the sun, I will wear a Panama hat, which I think is a pretty appropriate Florida hat, a formal hat for, very warm climates. Because a Panama hat is nice, it's kind of like a fedora, but not quite, it just has the indentation and the wide brim. And I like that style. It works well. It looks good with the suit or a shirt and tie or something. But I think you could also wear a Panama hat. To me, again, it's always a more formal hat. It looks kind of weird wearing it with shorts and a t-shirt, but that's just me. If you want to wear it with that, that's fine. But, at least I would ever wear it with would probably be, at least nice pants and a button-down shirt, but who's to say? I was going to say otherwise, I don't really wear other types of hats very often. Again, that's not to say that I don't own any. I do, but I don't really wear them that much. But let's see, I have 2 black fedora hats. I have a gray fedora hat. I have a straw fedora hat. I have, the Panama hat. I have a bowler hat. I have a boater hat, not to get the two confused. The bowler hat is usually it's black and it has the rounded top. A boater hat is straw, and it kind of looks like a mini top hat. So there is a big difference between those. And finally, if someone was wondering, I do own a top hat. I do. Though actually, it's one of those purchases, one day maybe, I don't know, that I really can't justify making because I ask myself, when the heck would I ever wear it? But the top hat that I own right now isn't the best one because, again, it's just not a hat that you would really wear that often these days. But if I had the type of money to just... justify such a ridiculous purchase. To justify a purchase for something I would seldom wear, I would upgrade the top hat and I would get a silk one. And those are very, very hard to come by right now. I mean, it would be an expensive buy. That's why I say, if there was a justifiable amount of money. Because when it comes down to top hats, right, you even look it up. You even Google pictures of top hats. And now you see the ones where, it's black, but there's no shine to it. And in my opinion, I think a top hat that looks very, very respectable are the old school ones that are black but have the shine to them. I think that a top hat should always have the band at the bottom, but it should be very shiny, in my opinion. It should be polished. Polished like a nice, as one would wear a formal, shoe, kind of. You have it polished, have a little bit of shine to it. That's how I think a top hat ideally should look. But those are expensive. Those are expensive to make, and they're rare to come by. Because, again, how many people do you see wearing those nowadays? Almost never. Some of the only encounters I've ever seen in media of people wearing them outside of costume, I think is at the, the Royal Ascot? And that's about it. I mean, here in the United States, The Kentucky Derby used to be a formal occasion where such hats were worn, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think you see men wearing top hats at the Kentucky Derby horse race in the U.S. I'm looking right now. Yeah, 'cause if you look up Kentucky Derby now, that's still a very big thing for ladies. They will go all out with the hats, let me tell you. But, you know, when I look, it's like... And then the guys, most of them I don't even think have hats on, or it's like the some flat caps, some fedoras, but no top hats. Yeah, it's a very formal hat, though. I think it could still be, in the appropriate circumstances, it could look absolutely magnificent. But again, it's just the occasion to wear one, right? It's like, well... What are you going to do? Go down to Starbucks and wear that and buy a coffee wearing one? You know, it's one of those things. You either have to have an appropriate occasion, or you just really... I mean, that is the epitome of not caring, right there. So that's my views on top hats, anyway. A subject that I haven't really talked about too much. Thanks for asking, though. Question 2. What are your thoughts on the burgers from In-N-Out and Shake Shack? Have you tried those? I haven't tried Shake Shack, but I have tried burgers from In-N-Out. Only once, when I was over in California for Tosh.0, when I filmed that. And it was good. I would go there again. Now look, if I'm ever in California again for some reason, I'll go to... you better believe I will go over to In-N-Out Burger. Aren't there In-N-Out burgers in Texas, too? That's not just a California thing, right? I don't know. I might not be making any sense, but if they are in Texas, if I ever find myself in the Lone Star State, then I will, of course, visit one there, too. Question 6. Since it's about shortwave, I figure may as well, since I feel sort of qualified to answer. Have you been able to get any channels in Japan, any good ones? I am learning Japanese, and maybe there are some good channels to hear over there. I know, the question, and I apologize, I don't mean to pick on you at all. I don't know if you mean shortwave stations that are broadcasting in the Japanese language, or stations that are broadcasting to Japan and receivable there. But the good news either way is that yes, there are stations that broadcast in Japanese, and there are stations in Japanese that you can receive both in North America and in Japan. So, first and foremost, in North America, there is one broadcast that would be very, very good for learning Japanese, and that would be NHK World Radio Japan. You know, may as well learn it direct from the international broadcaster, official from Japan, right? Get it straight from the source. They have a service to North America in Japanese. I guess it's for, Japanese expats who live in the U.S. and want to remain connected to Japan. So it's broadcast right toward the United States on the frequency of 6105, that's 6105, from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. It comes in crystal clear. It's broadcast with a very, very, very strong transmitter, and it's targeting the United States, so I mean, it will come in clearly. But 2 hours of Japanese programming there. Now, if you are in Japan, there are plenty of stations that target Japan that you can hear in Japanese language. It looks like there's about 113 different broadcasts in Japanese that you could enjoy. Domestically in Japan, I would recommend tuning into Radio Nikkei 1 or 2. They broadcast on a number of frequencies, especially 6115 and 6055 kilohertz domestically in Japan. So those should be receivable there. But I mean, other stations that broadcast in Japanese that you could receive in East Asia, the Voice of Indonesia, the Voice of Korea, that's North Korea, Radio Argentina, KBS World Radio from South Korea, China Radio International, Trans World Radio Guam, that's religious stuff, Reach Beyond Australia, and many other stations as well. So, I mean, there are lots and lots of broadcasts that still target Japan on shortwave. And again, I understand why, because I had a broadcast, and I know I've referenced this multiple times before, but it is pertinent to the topic. I had a broadcast in 2017 that targeted Japan, and there certainly are more than enough listeners over there to justify a broadcast. I mean, I think some people... Because Japan is a very, very interesting country also when it comes down to the technological balance of things. Because I think some people, when they, stereotyped or otherwise, they kind of look at, especially Japan and South Korea, and they look at, East Asia and they think of technological advancement. I think they think in some of the areas it is very developed, very, fast-paced, very connected, which it is. But in Japan, as opposed to South Korea, I don't know, more people over there still seem to have an appreciation for some of the old-school technology, not to the point of detriment, but just still kind of, I guess, like it, to certain extents, while also embracing the new stuff. It's an interesting balance from what I can wager. Whereas in South Korea, like with shortwave radio does not seem to be used much at all in South Korea. North Korea is another story, but I don't think there are many shortwave listeners in South Korea at all. I think it's just not popular over there. Japan is a whole nother story, but in South Korea, like for instance, I'll be brutally honest, when I had my broadcast for months, every Thursday, broadcast to Japan, the signal was certainly audible in the Korean peninsula, and maybe a couple people in North Korea listened, but I never received a single piece of correspondence from South Korea at all. Japan, probably thousands of emails came in from there. People in China listened, tons from Russia, even India, Southeast Asia, but nothing from South Korea. There was nothing. That makes me think it's just not very popular there, but no, in Japan, plenty of people still listen. Not that it's the most popular thing, but, I mean, look at it this way. When it comes down to stations like Radio Nikkei, that is not government-run. That is a private enterprise. It is a commercial shortwave station. It's actually 2 stations. So, I mean, that's commercial radio right there. Obviously, that costs a lot to run, but they're broadcasting for someone in Japan. The programming for those, again, it's Japanese, but I think Radio Nikkei, I think that's 2. Let me make sure, because there's the 2 stations and each one has different programming. There's one that I could pick up, Radio Nikkei 2. I'll actually listen to sometimes late at night. I can pick up the signal over here. And they play music. They're mostly a music station, but intersped with that, they also have business news, I think, in Japanese. So I guess it's supposed to target, like the white-collar office workers, and it's supposed to be something that I guess you could leave on during the workday and just kind of have music in the background, and then business financial news as well. So that station is always interesting, and again, I've picked them up directly. I sent them a reception report a couple weeks ago, and they sent me they sent me a QSL card. It was very nice, and there's very few stations that I'll ever write to and ask for something, but, I'll listen to them late at night whenever I can, so I thought may as well listen to a favorite of mine and let them know, they got someone inadvertently receiving their broadcast all the way in the U.S., but anyway, yeah, there's plenty to listen to. So thanks, Victor, for writing in. Enam writes in, says, just wanted to let you know, listening to your latest podcast, where you were talking about being bullied online starting around 2013, I felt so bad hearing it. I just don't understand mean. Honestly, it makes no sense to me, especially to a kid which you were. I also wanted to thank you for the years of entertainment you've given me. You have no idea how much it has helped me. Hopefully you have someone who helps you too. Anyway, don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll let you go. Hope you're having a nice day. Thank you, Enam, for writing in. And thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it. And, yeah, look, it was a rough time, but I'm just glad I made it through. I didn't do anything bad to myself. I made it through. It was a dark time, but look, we're here, and all is good in the end. I wish people were different. I wish people were more understanding. I wish people carried themselves with more dignity. But alas, that is not the case. So I'm just glad that at least I didn't get to me to the point of no return, right? We're still here, and we're still going stronger and better than ever, I say. Thank you for your kind words and support. We have, let's see, Andres in Illinois listening in. Awesome podcast. I listen when I'm working on homework, and I also love the food reviews too. I have a request if you could talk about the Beatles. If you do, say I asked for the topic because it will give me so much joy. So thank you. Yes, absolutely going out to Andres in Illinois tuned in right now. Yeah, topic about the Beatles. I could see you've got the Beatles profile picture going too. I would take it you're a big Beatles fan. I like the Beatles, I do. They're a good group, they're one of those iconic... Right, they are iconic, the Beatles. The thing that I like about the Beatles especially is that they were very flexible in that they didn't stay with one single style their entire run. And here's the other thing. When you look at the Beatles, all right, and let me just get the dates because I don't want to offend any hardcore Beatles fans. But look at it this way. They were active from 1960 to 1970. Really, 10 years. The biggest years of their popularity were from 1963 onward. So, then you look at it that way, that's only about 7 years right there. Think about how much they accomplished in that case. Think about how much they evolved. Look at their early hits, look at their later hits. That's some brilliant work right there, if you ask me, honestly. I mean, let's just, for instance, look at the album Please Please Me, right? That's a good example of, some pretty early Beatles. They were more clean cut. They kind of had the matching suits and everything. One of those early 1960s, pop groups, right? Very, I don't want to say formulaic, because that's not necessarily true. But, you listen to the type of music there, it's still decent. But for instance, one song I was listening to from that album the other day, Love Me Do. It's a very, very simple song, it's catchy. But by all means, it is not a song that you would describe as out there at all. And then go ahead, compare, let's say a song from that, compare it to anything Magical Mystery Tour, compare it to any song on that album, and just totally different. So, and that's what I like about them, though. That's another reason why I like the Beatles. They didn't just stick with the same thing the entire duration. They weren't afraid to try different things. They really went out there, and I appreciate that. They let their creativity... They let it flow, but, well, it's that was not without the assistance of various psychedelic substances, of course, to, as they would say, open the mind, right? But no, I like the Beatles, and they were brilliant musicians. I mean, after they broke up, obviously they had their differences, but they went their separate ways. But then they all did the solo work, and then they all had more hits. I always prefer the later Beatles compared to the earlier stuff, but, I mean, like I was just saying, I will still listen to the early Beatles music. I mean, that's, I was just listening to that the other day a couple times, so I really don't discriminate. I like it all. I know that's a cop-out answer, but it's the truth. Thanks for writing in, of course. I could talk about the Beatles for a while. I am no musician, but I could certainly discuss what limited facts and items that I know. Short email coming in from Charlie. Says, I just found your channel. Very happy with the videos. Very relaxing. Do what you're comfortable with. Thank you for your kind words, Charlie. Good to hear from you. Kelsey writes in, I had no idea you were answering questions today. I wanted to ask whether or not you have considered reviewing Whataburger. It's rather popular here in Texas. Some even prefer it to Chick-fil-A, surprisingly. It's interesting. Prefer it to Chick-fil-A? How interesting is that? Yeah, I've never had Whataburger. I know I get this question a lot, but I've never had it. But again, if I find myself in Texas or in an area where Whataburger is abundant and available, I will certainly try it out. But Chick-fil-A, that's a tough one. How can it top Chick-fil-A? It's... The thing I like about Chick-fil-A is that they don't have a huge menu, but it's like everything on their menu is good, a lot of the time I always go with the regular chicken sandwich or the spicy one, but, I'll tell you this, I don't eat much. I really don't. And there have been days where I will get a spicy chicken sandwich, and I can't even eat the entire thing. I can't. I'm just full, and, it's... So I said, well, I like the nuggets. The thing I like about the nuggets especially is that you can just eat them individually. And, you don't feel bad like with this half-eaten sandwich or something. You can just, the remaining nuggets that you didn't eat, you can kind of save it for a snack a little later if you want. And you can dip them into various sauces. I always like the Polynesian sauce. That's always a good one. And I went with that. It was great. It was great, so that's interesting. Next email comes in from Emily, writing, I'm thrilled to be emailing you right now. Hope to get a reply. Well, you are. You're getting a reply in audio form here. So you have a few questions. Question 1. Do you ever plan on hosting a meet and greet post-COVID? I've been a supporter since your early days, so I would love the chance to get to meet you in person. I don't know. That's an idea that I thought about here and there, but I really don't know. I'm very, very paranoid about that type of stuff, It's like, I don't know. There's chances for people to do bad things very easily. So I don't know if it's something that I would be able to do, but I think it would all just come down to personal comfort level, and organizations and logistics. So it's not something I would totally rule out. I would not give it a high % chance of happening, but don't think that it's not like I would ever want to not meet anyone. It's just the fact that, I guess, personal comfort level is what it comes down to, and just my own worries. So that's where that is. Question 2, what are some of your hobbies outside of reviewing? Well, shortwave radio, obviously. It's probably my biggest time waster, time occupier, It's just something that it's interested me for years now, with no sign of stopping. It's just there's so much about the medium that I like. I like the technicalities of it. I like just I don't know. I just like everything about it. I like the aesthetic. I like the science that goes into it. I like the stations. I like the programs. There's nothing I really don't like about it. So the audience is great too. I say that as a broadcaster. So really, that's why I think it's such a big time consumer there. It's just fascinating. Through radio you can still reach all these people around the world, and that it's still a thing. I would have, the way people talk about this stuff, you would have thought it would be dead decades ago, but it's still here. It's still here to enjoy. It's still used. That's the most amazing thing about it all. So, shortwave radio is big. Other things that I do, I monitor current events. I know, boy, what a fun hobby that is, right? Oh, I know, that's a real popular one. But I do. I shamelessly say that. Of course, I follow what's going on in the world. Right now I'm monitoring, of course, the situation in the U.S., with the election incoming and all of the developments there. But I also monitor the coronavirus pandemic still, though I don't follow that as vigorously, though I still do. Now the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, so, I spend a lot of time with that type of stuff. Music always interests me. Sometimes I'll go out, get some fresh air, though I've been staying in a lot lately. Otherwise, reading short stories and trying to write a few of my own is always interesting, but for me, a lot of people think that because I review the food, right, that's what my entire life is. Food, 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 right? I'm always cooking something and always eating something, but that isn't the case. It's certainly enjoyable to do the reviews. It's always a fun time, and it's, of course, something that I could talk about, but really, I eat when I do, and I do the reviews, when that's necessary. But really, it's not something that I spend any sort of extraordinary time on. I mean, of course, I could always answer these questions pertaining to food, but really, when it comes down to what I do each day, the amount of time I dedicate toward that is probably minimal in terms of everything else. It's just, could you imagine if I tried to cross some things over? How, let's just ask this hypothetical question. How do you think a video that I do out of the blue, analyzing the Armenia-Azerbaijan, I wouldn't call it a war yet because it's not official on paper, but conflict, and I uploaded that to the Report of the Week channel, how do you think that would go over? It would be dreadful. Everyone would tune out. They wouldn't want to hear it, and then they would question, why are you even talking about it? You're the guy that eats burgers. Why should I listen to you? So, that's what this podcast is for. The few who go ahead and listen to this, and you could hear me prattle on about these sorts of things, if that's what you want to subject yourself to. So thank you, Emily, for writing in. Good to hear from you. Next email comes in from Albert. He just has a question. I only recently started listening and watching your content. I deal with insomnia, and listening to your show helps me fall asleep. I was listening to a show you did a few months ago, and you mentioned you needed someone that spoke Russian to record an intro. I speak Russian and would love to help out. Let me know if you still need that. Well, thank you, Albert, for your offer and for your kind email. I'm glad the show helped with the insomnia. That's absolutely fantastic. Hey, for anyone who listens to this to fall asleep, if it's working for you, then keep it up. Keep it up, by all means. Sure. Yeah, I will get back to you. I'll let you know, and if it's something you're comfortable with, we'll go from there. But, yeah, I got a few offers, to do the intros in Russian and Japanese, and I'll use them on the shortwave broadcasts from time to time. And it's always fantastic, when you hear from a listener in Russia or Japan that understands it and emails in. It's great. But, absolutely, I have a couple IDs, but I will rotate through them. So, I'll add yours to the mix if you do record one, and then I'll include that on broadcasts here and there. Certainly. So, thank you so much. Greg sends a short email. I'm sure I speak for many of your fans when I say thank you, Report of the Week. Thank you for giving us quality, wholesome content in both your reviews and podcasts, especially over these trying months. In the midst of all this chaos, I've found myself looking forward to your insightful commentary each week. If the world had more steady minds like yours, it wouldn't have half the problems it does. You're a glimmer of hope for many of us. I'm not sure we as fans say it enough, so thank you for all your hard work. Well, thank you, Greg. I think you're giving me too much credit in what you said about the world having more people like me. I don't know where we would end up in that case, but thank you. I know that some of the things, for instance, that I discussed in today's show weren't the I don't know, the most lighthearted subjects. I don't try to do these sorts of discussions to try to incite anything, to try to, give some sort of angry diatribe. I don't say it to try to fearmonger or, say, I think there's going to be this violence, so make sure you go to my store and buy, this special Reviewbrah firearm or something so you could defend yourself against the chaos. I don't have this sort of product placement. The most I will ever do is recommend shortwave radios every now and then, but I've been doing that for years, and that's it. And I have no contract with any sort of shortwave company or anything. I recommend them because it's something I sincerely believe in, honestly. But, I just talk about these things because it's of interest to me. And, especially in that worst case scenario, I just want everyone to, at the very least, mentally understand that there's that possibility of things really going south. But that's it, that's it. I don't want to make anyone scared. I don't want to make anyone paranoid. Really, this broadcast is just a clean slate, and sometimes I'll talk about what's going on in the world. Sometimes I won't. But it's just, you never know what you're going to get from week to week. I don't even know what I'm going to get. For goodness sake, I don't even plan this show out. I just grab the microphone. The most of a plan I ever have for this broadcast are the emails, and that's it. And I don't even have any sort of order that I read them. I just have the inbox open right now, and I'm just kind of randomly going from one to the next. I've pre-read them all like a week or two ago, but I haven't read them since, so it's like they're all new to me, honestly. That's the beauty of it, though. It's like you never know, you don't know what you're going to get, and honestly, I don't either. I think that's a lot of the fun of recording this broadcast, and I hope in connection with that, dear listeners, it is somewhat enjoyable to listen to as well. Next email comes in from Diana and Mike in Tampa. I suppose this question is already answered, but I'll read a little bit anyway. Diana in Tampa, Florida, says we're big fans of the YouTube channel, and my boyfriend always listens to the podcast, and you guys suggested that I tried out the Wendy's bacon pretzel pub burger. So I did. Yeah, I tried it out because I got emails like yours, and I got comments and more emails and all this stuff. I said, well, alright, there has to be a demand for it, so let's see what all the hype is about. So that's what we did. And, it was good. It was good. One thing that I wouldn't dare say in the review to not offend the corporate overlords, What's wrong with me? Why am I laughing at that? But, maybe because it's true. I don't know. I don't do these reviews sponsored, but it's like I just think back. When I tried out the Grande Stacker from Taco Bell, I hated the thing. And statistically, the video did extremely good. It got about 200,000 views in a single day. And then it just went flat. I went from about 200,000 views in a day to getting 5,000 views the very next day. And that isn't how videos normally behave on YouTube, so I know what happened. Taco Bell, they didn't like that I received a piece of garbage as a product and was honest about it, so they said, make sure you remove that video from the search so that no one can find it. And obviously that's what happened, so, these companies, they watch, but they see, if they don't like what they see, they will come after you for it, or at least make sure it doesn't get out. But I thought to myself, I don't care. I don't care. When I do these reviews, how I've always done them, is if it's a good product, I'll say that it's good, and if it's a bad product, I'll say that it's bad. I don't care how big or small the channel is. That's what I've been doing for close to a decade, and that's what I'll continue to do. It's a menial thing, but people deserve to know whether something's good or bad. I'm not going to sit there and like everything because, that's wrong. Thankfully, there are a lot of good products out there, but there's some bad ones too. It's not all one way or the other. But the pretzel burger from Wendy's was good this time, though I got to admit, when I opened the thing up, and I looked at it, and I said this in the video before that too, don't judge a book by its cover, and I saw this big glob of white stuff. I was grossed out, honestly, I was. I didn't think that was very aesthetically pleasing. Kind of reminded me of like a marshmallow melted onto this burger, and I thought to myself, oh boy, it didn't look good. To me, it really didn't. It just didn't look appealing. But I thought to myself, well, alright, just forget about that. Forget any gross mental connotations it may conjure up. Eat it and see what you think. So I did, and it was actually good. It was one of the better burgers I've had, so... that's why you can't just judge it because it looks like this or looks like that. I mean, there's some things that look like total slop, and that's exactly what they are. It's like disgusting. It's like this stuff... Who the hell invented this? What is this? This is disgusting. And sometimes I think it's like some sort of sick, joke, saying, you're all like... Sometimes I think these people are in the boardroom and they make something that's like intentionally like this slop. They're kind of like, yeah, it's like you're all pigs eating out of the feeding trough. But other things are just very sloppy, but they're good. They taste good. But, the pretzel burger. I tried that out. It was there years ago. Back in 2013. I tried it, and I hated it. I mean, I know I really must have hated it. I don't remember it. I don't remember what I didn't like about it. I think it was like some sort of sauce or something. I guess. But I tried it in August of 2013. And I must have hated it so much that in 2014 I actually revisited it. And that's something that I almost never did with items back then, so I must have really been biased against it and really hated it. I really, really must have hated it, though, because when I look at the description of the review, all I wrote was, today's review is for Wendy's pretzel burger, terrible. I really must have disliked that. And I think I tried it in 2014, and I got it without the sauce. And I think I liked it more then, but... Yeah, I really hated it. Hated it back then. But this time, it wasn't the same exact thing. It was much better, in my opinion. Okay. Next, email comes in. Listener with no name. That's fine. Halloween question. There's been rumors that Halloween might be cancelled. Do you have any thoughts about it? Now, Halloween, no doubt, is going to be different this year, as it has been in the past, mind you. There have been times where Halloween has been cancelled on a regional basis, but I remember in, the New York, New Jersey, the tri-state area, in 2011, Halloween got cancelled because there was a snowstorm that early, and there was snow everywhere. You can't trick-or-treat with all this snow. So Halloween was cancelled back then. And then 2012, Halloween was cancelled again because of Hurricane Sandy and its impact. And then after that, it was just never the same. Now, I think a lot of people like Halloween. It's, a festive time of year. The aesthetic is always interesting. In terms of some of the decorations, the costumes, some of them are just, I don't know, not my thing. Not my thing. It's always, one thing or the next, right? We won't go there today. But I'm just waiting for the day there's a sexy Reviewbrah costume that's going to be released, right? It's always, you ever notice that's how it always is, Always very biased one way. The guys' costumes, it's some silly thing, but then always, for everyone else, sexy this, sexy that, a sexy pirate, a sexy Donald Trump. That's a real thing, Is there going to be a sexy Joe Biden this time around? I'm sure. You always get the political costumes and all that stuff. The very sexualized stuff. Wear what you want, just try to be a dignified individual. Be safe out there too with the COVID and everything. I mean, Halloween, like I said, is going to be different, and I think to a certain extent it will be cancelled. Trick-or-treating will probably still exist, but it might be different. You might see more places that'll just have the bowl outside with the candy, and it's not going to be really face-to-face, door-to-door stuff. Obviously, having a bowl of candy outside is more COVID compliant. So, yeah, it's something to consider. But like Halloween parties, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. At least this year. I guarantee, though, because Halloween is so close to the election, you're not going to hear about it much. But if you probably look, in the couple days after, you're going to hear, every now and then it's going to be probably lower on the page in terms of news. But I bet you're going to hear about like a super spreading event from a Halloween party or something, that'll get in the news, I'm sure. So it's going to be different, but what I was saying is that I like the aesthetic of the holiday. I like the lights, the decorations, and really the grim atmosphere, that it has. I like it. And I think the decorations and stuff will still be around. I mean, you're seeing all the hype about some, 12-foot tall skeleton thing that's being sold in certain places, right? That's a little bit of a trend here and there. I still see some decorations coming up, but I think it'll be more of a day this year to kind of stay in and watch scary movies, Maybe have a small little gathering with a couple friends, but, stay in, watch some scary movies, buy some candy for yourself, and maybe put it in a little, a little festive receptacle and pretend you got it from trick-or-treating. The absurdity of that. And, stay in. Hey, listen to the special VORW Halloween broadcast, right? That'll be one for the ages. So, yeah, it'll be different, alright. It'll be different. Next question comes in from, again, no name was given. Looks like the listener just goes by M, which is fine. So, M writes in, "Hello, I love the podcast. I recently read an article about a man who murdered someone while sleepwalking and was charged and convicted as a result. What are your thoughts on the situation? Should he be held responsible?" Absolutely. Absolutely. This isn't one of those situations where an individual, because it's like, now I don't know the details of the case, but also it would come down, either way, someone is dead and the person sleepwalking is responsible for such a thing. So as a result, in my opinion, they should be convicted and they should be sentenced accordingly. Usually for something like murder, it should be, I believe, a harsher sentence. But that's just my personal viewpoint. I think one thing that should be considered is how was the person killed, right? For instance, was the person somehow sleepwalking and, did they sleep, let's say, with a firearm under their pillow or something? And somehow they grabbed it and shot their friend or whoever, their partner, in the head, and that was it. Or did they somehow shamble over to the kitchen, grab a knife and stab the person? It's like, there's different ways, obviously, to kill someone, so what was the means upon which this horrific act was carried out? Either way, if I was the judge, let's say if it was a trial by bench and I was the judge in that case, I would, of course, thoroughly examine it. There's always such a thing as reasonable doubt, but as long as it could be proven without a reasonable doubt that this individual was responsible for the murder, sleepwalking or not, that's no excuse to kill someone. That is not a common thing to happen. I think we've all, on occasion, at least had a sleepwalking experience, or know someone who has. This isn't something that happens. It's not a normal thing, just get up, sleepwalk, and commit a murder in that case. So because that is not a normal thing, and that is not a justifiable behavior, of course the individual would be held accountable, and to me, that's no excuse. Someone is dead. And that is at your hands. Now, I know one can argue, but it wasn't preventable, right? But think of it this way, right? Imagine if, let's say, your friend, your partner, your family member, whoever, think of someone near and dear to you, got killed, was murdered, I should say, because killed, could imply accident, but let's say was murdered, and the person responsible said, well, I was sleepwalking and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, would you just say, oh, okay, sorry about that, yeah, it happens to the best of us, alright. No, I doubt it anyway. I know some people are more forgiving than others, but I just don't see how that can be just totally blown off. And, I don't think many people would say, oh, I get it, bro. I would have done the same thing if I were sleepwalking too. No. They have to do the time for that, in my opinion. It's a serious thing. It's a serious thing. Certainly an odd case either way, but sometimes I even think, is such a thing even possible? How do we know that wasn't even a convoluted excuse? There was really a motive there, and the person was totally awake and, committed the murder, and just kind of made this up as a real poor excuse to try to say they didn't do it or weren't responsible for it. There'd be a new one, but I know I've heard about things like that before, where I think there was one case where someone, I somehow think it was Texas, but I'm not sure, said he took Ambien, which is a popular prescription medicine for sleep, to help induce sleep, and he claimed that while he was on that, he killed his wife or something, and he said, it wasn't me that did it, it was the Ambien that made me do it, so I should be not guilty. And yes, these substances can alter one's mind. They could alter one's, ability to discern right from wrong in some cases. It can lead people to make stupid decisions, but in the end, we are still the one committing that atrocious act. Everyone's different. I mean, if someone gets sentenced, in my opinion, to a crime, and has to do the time for it, I think there is a chance that some people can be rehabilitated in prison and become better people, but I do believe there are some individuals who are rotten to the core. And, especially people who are just totally psychopathic. They will be evil, to the day they die. And nothing will ever change that. I think the worst are some of the individuals who, they pretend to be rehabilitated, and then they get out and they just go and do something just as bad or worse. But it's such a fascinating... that's another thing. I could talk about this stuff all day. The amount of police stuff that I watch, forensic stuff, legal stuff is... the amount of that I consume also each day is huge. That's why I can talk about it in great length. Again, I think many times I open my mouth and nothing of value really comes out, but it's certainly something I can kind of talk about at the metaphorical water cooler and pass the time. But, there's so many other factors. I mean, you could have someone who's just evil, you could have someone who's just really upset and has poor judgment and does something in the heat of the moment. You could have someone who's battling mental illness or addiction, and, these bad things happen, and sometimes in those cases that can be under control and someone can be rehabilitated, but it's really, in my opinion, it's a case-by-case basis. And that's what it comes down to, but, again, the legal system and all that it is of interest to me, but I just, I don't have what it takes to ever do anything with that, but like I said, in that case, I could just go on, but yeah, to answer the question, he absolutely should be held responsible for that. To me, that's just no excuse. It's a sad situation if it's genuine, but still someone's life is gone. Someone's life is just extinguished, just like that. Benjamin in Chile writes in, first of all, I would say I love the radio show. Thank you for putting so much dedication to what you do. You have a great ability to speak, and I admire it. I'm from Chile, the most seismic country in the world, and I'm a novice writing in English, so sorry if there's any mistakes. But my question is, have you felt an earthquake where you live? I know that in Florida there are many hurricanes, but I wonder if you felt any earthquakes. Best wishes and stay safe, from Benjamin. Well, thanks, Benjamin, and your English was perfect, as a matter of fact. There were no issues, no grammatical errors, just very, very good flow, so you wrote in perfect English, Benjamin. No worries there. Chilean listener, and, well, to get to your question, I have never experienced a strong earthquake. I have been through several mild earthquakes, but I actually never noticed them until I found out later. I think the only one that I ever remember was years ago. It was, let me look. I think it was around Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken. I'm just curious if this is the one that I'm thinking of, but it might not be. But I think it was. Yeah, okay, so this is the one that I was thinking of. The only one that I kind of felt a tiny bit was the 2011 Virginia earthquake. It was on August 23rd, 2011, and it was a magnitude 5.8 earthquake that I guess hit Virginia, and it was sort of near Washington, D.C., but I did feel that one. And the interesting thing is, because it was so far away, I didn't really put it all together and realize that this was an earthquake until I checked the news. All I remember, because this has to be the one, because it was like mid-afternoon, and it does say that this hit like at 1:54 p.m., which is exactly that time frame, so that's definitely the one. I remember I was talking to someone, and I was looking out the window, and all I remember was that it was just a strange feeling. I didn't feel anything shaking. I didn't feel anything moving. But all I could tell was this very, very mild yet sort of foreign sensation. But it was indescribable, and I didn't really pay attention. All I just remember, I didn't even say anything. I just remember thinking, oh, that feels a little weird, and then it went away. And that was it. So it wasn't like a real, full-blown earthquake. But I know that that was the earthquake that I felt, but it was at such a far distance I didn't register to me. But otherwise I haven't dealt with any strong earthquakes, but of course the real bad ones are terrifying to see, It's, I don't know, I imagine you feel so helpless, so powerless, the earth is just going to do its thing, and you're just there along for the ride and hope nothing happens to you. So I've never dealt with an earthquake personally of bad magnitude, but I know that Chile has had lots and lots of earthquakes, right there in the Pacific Rim, very, very earthquake-prone environment. So, yeah, thank you for writing. I haven't really gotten too many earthquake-related questions before, so it's great to hear from you. You're listening in to VORW International. All right, there are more emails to read and respond to, so let's continue where we can, and let's go from there. Next email comes in from Mike in Ontario, Canada. It says, "Hi, Reviewbrah. I've been a fan of your reviews for a while now, and I just discovered the VORW podcast. I listen on my drive to work and really enjoy your take on current events. Living in Canada, I feel we don't get a lot of new menu items offered in the US, unfortunately. I was wondering if you have seen any food items, be it fast food or anything really, that you would like to try from Canada. Anyway, thanks for keeping me entertained on what would be a very dull drive to and from work." So anyway, it's an interesting subject that you bring up. I don't really, to tell you the truth, I don't really have, I don't think, any items from Canada that I desperately want to try. But obviously I do know that there are different releases, from one country to the next. And I guarantee, I bet if I really paid attention, there would be items from chains in Canada that would be interesting. So I know that, while I was up in Canada a few times over the years, I've always had a few things, but there's nothing that really stuck out to me. But, although now that I really rack my brain, I remember one chain that I went to when I was in Canada years ago that was pretty good. I think it was called St. Hubert, or something to that extent. It was a chicken place, and it was in Quebec. I remember that. That was pretty good. So, I guess there is that in that case, but I'm sure if I really rack my mind around it, there will be others thanks for writing in. Next email comes in from Cole, writing, I wanted to take the time to write you and extend personal gratitude for the podcast. While I am not a personal fan of the videos on your YouTube channel, I find the podcast very charming and I appreciate how accessible it is. I think your travel reviews, such as for Amtrak, JetBlue, and your hotel review, are fantastic. And if the opportunity ever arose for you to do it for a large company, I'd ask you at least to consider it. I like the idea of starting a podcast for myself, but I can't personally get past the thought that there really isn't much worth saying that either isn't already being talked about or truly deserves attention to begin with. I remember in one of your videos you mentioned you like to write short stories. How are they coming along? I'm not a night owl like you, but one night I was on a long road trip and I discovered Coast to Coast AM. Your repeated advertising of your interest and involvement in shortwave radio reminded me how cool it was to find that station in the middle of nowhere at 1 a.m. Do you have an affordable beginner shortwave recommendation? It's been a few rough years for me. I don't get out much, which I actually don't mind, but it's taken a toll on the way I perceive the concept and necessity of community. Wanted to reach out and let you know something as simple as a radio/podcast show has made the past few weeks less lonely. So thank you, Cole, for writing in, and thank you for your suggestion and kind words as well. When it comes down, well, let's see. In terms of the travel reviews, that is something that I could certainly do more of in the future. It's just with the COVID and everything, that's really put a damper on that. But, once things kind of clear up a bit, that might be something I could start getting into again. Those are fun, they were very fun to do, I have to admit. What else? Oh, the short stories you mentioned also. The short stories are still coming along. I took a little bit of a break from them this week, but, I was thinking at some point I'll just take the metaphorical pen to paper again and begin writing some more. And finally, in terms of a shortwave recommendation, I always recommend the Teksun, that's TECSUN, PL 380, that's Teksun, PL 380, or the Teksun PL 310 ET. Those are two good radios. They're around $40 to $50, but they are extremely, extremely good for the price. That's my go-to recommendation, and many, many listeners all over the world seem satisfied with those receivers. So thank you again, Cole, for writing in. Next we have an email coming in from Brittany. Hi friend, I'm having a hard time recently. What do you do when you're having a hard time and you're sad? First-time radio listener, I am excited. Well, thank you, Brittany, for writing in. Hope you're a second-time listener now. And, that's a tough one because, see, what my opinion anyway is that when we're feeling down, and of course, I think we all have the good days, we all have the bad days, it's just some people have more good than bad days, some people have more bad than good. I mean, it just depends. It depends on what you're going through, how your mind is, how things are, right? There's so many different circumstances. And the thing is, to me, is that I don't think there is any sort of uniform answer as to how you feel better when you're feeling down. I really don't think it's as easy as just saying, follow these 5 simple steps and you will have a smile on your face 100% of the time, right? I just don't think it's as easy as that. So, it really just comes down to the individual. I know you asked me personally, well, what do I do when I'm feeling down? What I try to do is it depends on the circumstance. If it's something that I can perhaps work on, maybe I will try to address it head on. And sometimes I'll just try my best to tackle whatever problem that is. But other times, let's say it's something that you really can't do that with, then sometimes just either A, trying to just distract yourself can help, listening to music, watching some shows, watching a movie, whatever it is. One thing that actually does help is trying to go to sleep. Sometimes I think just being able to go to sleep almost gives your mind a little bit of like a reset button, and it can really, really help, in my opinion. Other circumstances as well, if you have someone that you could talk to, someone that you trust and feel you can confide in, sometimes a support system can be a huge, huge difference. So having those conversations as well, and being able to talk it out with someone, again, you feel like you're able to do so with, can, again, make a world of difference. And that's my on-the-spot advice. One thing I would recommend that you listen to if you want is, I would say check out a podcast that I gave back, let's say, February 7th, 2019. I gave a podcast, and it was titled, How to Get Through a Bad Day. So I would recommend you check that out. You could find it on the YouTube channel, VORW Podcast. Search back, and it's called How to Get Through a Bad Day, and it's an entire show about 40 minutes long that deals exactly with your topic. Largely it focuses on support systems, but I try to give other advice as well. By no means is it any sort of cure-all. It's just a little bit of perspective and something that might be worth giving a listen to. So thank you again for writing, and I hope you feel better soon. Jake in Washington State says, I'm a big fan of the show. Keep up the great work. Also, what made you interested in starting your YouTube career? Thanks again. Well, thank you, Jake, for writing in. What made me interested in starting the YouTube, and again, this is something that I know I've talked about in the past, but I started it for fun. I think that's one of the most important things. I think some people nowadays, they see how you can do YouTube stuff as, if you get lucky enough, a full-time job, and that's it. So I think as a result, some people will see that. That's what the goal is, right? That's what they want to do, want to be. So they make a YouTube channel, and they make content with the express purpose of trying to be this certain way, to try to get, whatever views and clicks and likes, and try to get monetized and try to be this certain thing. But I think in many instances, if you start a YouTube channel for the express purpose of monetary gain, it may actually not end up being as successful. You might end up getting burnt out because is it really a sort of content that you want to do, or do you think that you need to do it to try to get big, right? You'll get, I think, worn out, burnt out, and then you might end up just looking at YouTube with contempt if what you had hoped for does not materialize. For instance, when I started the YouTube, I guess 9 years ago now, I started it out purely for the fun of it. And that's why I made videos. I didn't make them to try to do this or that. I made a YouTube channel because it was just fun. It was going to be like I was going to have my own little show that I would do once a week. And that was it. It was really just something fun to do. And let me tell you, for the first 2 years that I had my channel, from early 2011 to early 2013, I uploaded videos at least on a weekly basis, sometimes 2-3 times a week. So I was very, very active on YouTube, hundreds of videos. You know how many subscribers I had after those 2 years of doing that? After week after week after week of making videos, I only had 200 subscribers. After 2 years straight of uploading. That was it. Just 200 subscribers. But I wasn't doing the channel for views. I wasn't doing the channel for subscribers. So regardless of those numbers, I wasn't discouraged. I wasn't despondent. I wasn't distraught. As a matter of fact, it was crazy, Here I was doing this little show that I was having fun doing, and 200 other people actually took the time out of their day to subscribe it because they wanted to see more of it. How amazing is that? And I think as a result, that's why I didn't really get burnt out, because I wasn't doing it to try to say, all right, I'm going to make this video, and in 2 weeks I need to have 1,000 subscribers. I need to have this. I need to make X amount of dollars, right? Where you set these rigid deadlines, you start working like crazy, and then you don't reach them, and then how do you feel? You don't feel all that great. So I just think one of the most important things about starting a YouTube channel, even if you want to try to do it, to try to do it as a job or whatever, you have to enjoy what it is that you're doing. That is the most important thing. You have to enjoy what you do. If you don't, it is not going to work out. And it's going to show, and people are going to be able to see it. They're going to be able to tell. And it's going to hurt you as well. So you just have to enjoy what you're doing. Whatever it is that you want to do, have fun with it. And I think that will show. And I know we all focus on these big numbers, but please don't rule out small numbers either. Even a few views, that's still a few people checking out whatever it is that you made. Don't forget about that. And again, like I said, I only had 200 subscribers for 2 years. And that was more than enough to keep me going, because it was crazy that 200 people even took the time out of their day to even watch my programs. So that's my advice there, but that's why I started the YouTube. It was just all for fun. And, it had its ups and downs. It had some difficult times, but here we are, right? We made it through that. It was, what a ride it's been, I have to say. Benjamin has a quick question. Recently watched your video, Why I Wear Suits All the Time. In the video, you show a lot of your suits, and the last one you showed, I took a lot of interest to. You were wearing a black 3-piece suit, and you had chains that came from the pants and ended around the stomach. I'm not sure what they are called, but would love any information into what those are. Hopefully I don't sound too ignorant on the matter. I tune in on Spotify and on shortwave. So thank you, Benjamin. Yes, I know exactly what it is that you're talking about. I know that, the vernacular might not be 100%, but I know exactly what you mean. So what that is a pocket watch. That is a pocket watch, and let me just verify. So yeah, what that is, and I'm at the video right now, and I'm looking at the last suit. Yeah, the black one right there. Right, what that is a, that's a pocket watch. Now, that isn't something that's worn much anymore by a lot of people, granted. A pocket watch is a very old-school thing, but I actually prefer that to a wristwatch. That's what I do. If I ever wear a 3-piece suit, I always wear a watch. I have a few pocket watches, and I just like the style. Again, it's not something that you see much at all. You really see few people that ever wear them like that. But how it is you have, the watch on one end of the chain, then you have like a little bit of a clip or something else on the other end. And there's all sorts of things you can do, but what I just do for that particular style is I put one end of the watch, the timepiece in particular, I put that in the pocket of my vest. I feed the watch chain through one of the buttons, and then I put the other part of it in the other pocket, so it kind of loops up and then back down from one pocket of the vest to the other. But it is a working, functioning pocket watch, but you can look it up if you want more examples. Just look up pocket watch vest, and you will see for yourself. If you go to Google Images or whatever, you will see plenty of images and pictures of all sorts of different configurations. One thing that's popular is to have the pocket watch just go from the one pocket and then have it fastened at or around the button. But me personally, I like feeding it through and going from one pocket to the next. I just prefer that style more. But it's an accessory that, again, just is not worn much anymore. But, I've worn pocket watches with 3-piece suits for years and years. That's just what I always do. I was even wearing it the other day when the last time I wore a vest. So, it's just an accessory. It's just a matter of personal preference. But that's what that chain is. So, I like the way that it looks, and always happy to get to your question. Alright, Danielle in New Mexico writes in. I know she's a very regular listener to the shortwave broadcasts. She has a few questions. Number 1, what are some of your favorite sounds, besides music? I like all manner of water sounds, crackling of fire, the hiss popping of vinyl, crunchy leaves, scissors, and skate blades gliding on ice. Some of my favorite sounds, that's difficult to say. I do like just silence. That's nice also, but what I like, I suppose, are just the smooth white noise. In that water can be nice. Even just the wind can be nice. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees or the leaves. Like right now, it's a little cool outside because of the fall. And I do hear a bit of a breeze. I doubt the microphone's picking it up, but I hear a little bit of a breeze kind of going through some of the trees. And that's just a relaxing sound to me. I do not like the sound of many man-made things, such as traffic, the sound of people talking in the distance, etc. Those I don't like. But more or less just sorts of discordant noises I'm not a big fan of. Secondly, I've heard you give light-hearted chuckles, but I can't imagine you having a round of boisterous, hearty laughter. What is something that had you laughing so hard that you feared a status change of your then currently unsoiled pants? What a question. Well, a lot of the things that'll make me laugh very, very much are, it's usually situational or circumstantial. It's one of those things that you can't really explain at the given time. I think we all kind of know how that stuff is. It's like just something in terms of a situation that, I don't know, it just kind of sends you over the edge and it's just too much, Sometimes it could be something very obscure, very mundane, but it's just like that's the cherry on top that'll do it, It could even be something that, when taken by itself, isn't even all that funny, but then, when you put it all together, it's just hysterical. It's one of those things that's difficult to explain, but I think a lot of you guys get it. Question 3, do you see yourself as stationary with time passing by you, or do you see yourself as the one moving through time? For instance, would you say, I am approaching the deadline, or would you say the deadline is approaching? I don't know, I suppose I try to balance the two out. I am in a place right now where I am comfortable, and I'm happy being there. So in that case, I would say I'm more or less stationary in that regard. But at the same time, I don't mean to be left behind in some way or another. So, while I can be stationary and content with that, I do try to balance it out a little bit and try to stay in tune with things as well. So, really it is an honest balance between the two. And finally, you have a bonus question, which is quite nice, considering the topic of the last email. You once proclaimed to use a pocket watch in lieu of a wristwatch, which I applaud you for. May we see this pocket watch? If the gods are good, you would wear it with a vest and a wing or imperial collar in a video sometime. And dare I ask for the frock coat to make an appearance as well. I'll show the pocket watch in an upcoming video, I certainly will. But I do wear it whenever I wear a vest. Really, whenever I wear a vest, I do wear the pocket watch with it, and I like those older outfits too, because it's just a style that I like. I like the formality of it all, and you just see it so rare nowadays, Thank you again for your questions. It was a pleasure to get to them, and always appreciate the regular listenership. Next email comes in from our Malaysian listener. A few random questions. So are you interested in the share market? Now, I believe you mean the stock market. It does interest me. There's so much that it comes down to that I can't say I'm very articulate in terms of it, but it is something that I follow. And I do follow the stock market. It is interesting to kind of watch financial news, see the markets, and go from there. There's one radio show that I listen to pretty regularly on the shortwave. It's on WWCR, and it's called Financial Survival. And now the show is biased because it's run by an organization that tries to sell gold coins. They kind of believe in gold and silver and precious metals as being better to, as they say, the fiat currency. So they always have, a slant on what they say, to try to get people to buy gold. But every single day, Monday through Friday, right after the stock market closes, they have a live hour-long show where they discuss the markets and they talk about different things, and I listen to it. I usually listen to it. I think it's from 4 to 5 p.m., and I always see what they have to say. It's just interesting to hear that perspective. Again, even if there's a slant to it, it's just interesting to hear what certain people think and how they analyze the markets, etc. So I do, it's something that I follow. Again, I can't say I'm extremely well-versed, but I do follow the stock market and all of that. What are your thoughts on the Rubik's Cube, and do you know how to solve it? If you can, what is your average solve time? On average, I can solve it in 30 seconds. Now, I am not good with the Rubik's Cube at all. I still think, it's old school, but it's very interesting, and I like it, but I am by no means any sort of expert with that whatsoever. I am terrible with it, honestly. I'll sit there, fumbling around like an idiot for an hour, but I know there's a formula to solving it, and if I probably really research that, I might be able to go ahead with that, but no, I am a total dunce in terms of that. I can't. I'll sit there not knowing what I'm doing, it's, I remember when I was young, I had a Rubik's Cube. I went ahead and I solved one side, I got one side a certain way. And I was so proud of myself then, I thought to myself, oh wow, I can't believe I solved a side of the Rubik's Cube, I was so excited. But that's nothing, it's, So no, I am not good at that, but 30 seconds, that's a really good time if you ask me. Okay, next up we have, let's see, a suggestion coming in from a listener who goes by the name Missy Marie, who writes, just wanted to say, obviously, how awesomely wholesome you remain, and I appreciate you because there really isn't much on YouTube, which is blissfully innocent and fun. I've never contacted someone on YouTube, and I don't really have any social media accounts, but I felt compelled as I watched your last year's average day video, and I was admiring your hair. I began wondering why you haven't gone ahead and marketed your own hair gel. I truly think you'd be a great candidate and sell lots. You work hard enough, and it would surely be great merchandise to add, given that it's such a major contributor to your known repertoire. Just a thought. I'm not sure how you would go about doing that, but otherwise I hope your week is going great. So thank you very much for your kind words and suggestion. Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting suggestion. The one thing that I think would just be difficult in that case is that I don't have any sort of special formula. I use an established product that I like. I use Brill Cream, which is a very, very old school thing, but that's probably why I like it. The thing that I like about... Now, here is the one thing when it comes down to hair. Originally, in 2011 and 2012, I used this sort of hair gel that was called LA Looks hair gel, and it was absolutely dreadful. It was the worst I've ever used, because it was totally alcohol-based, so you put it in, and it makes the hair completely solid. It's like if you tried to run a comb through the hair with that hair gel in it, literally the teeth on the comb would snap off. Nothing would work. It was like a helmet. You could literally, tap on it and it would be like, it would be totally solid. So, as a result, it didn't even have the best hold either. And then you add water and it would be like this slimy mess. But I didn't know any better. I thought that's just how it was supposed to be. Then I tried using pomade, but I didn't like pomade either, because the thing with pomade was that it didn't seem to offer much in the way of hold, and I didn't like the fact that it was like a jelly, and you had to warm it up, kind of rubbing it in your hands, and then you rub it through the hair, but the hair is dry, and it seems to just kind of catch on it, and it didn't seem smooth, and it was difficult to comb through. so pomade had issues as well. Finally, what worked for me was Brylcreem, because it was more of like a sort of liquid, or like a cream, but you could run it through the hair, and it offered a good hold, a good shine, but the hair remained totally soft afterward as well, which is fantastic. So I've gone with that ever since, but the one thing that I do now, in terms of just my personal style, and I've been doing this since I'd say late 2017, is now what I do is I add a lot of water to my hair before I put the Brylcreem in, because what it does is it kind of pushes the hair down a bit, adds to more hold, and that's what I like. I know a lot of people nowadays, they find, more voluminous hair to be more appealing, but I really don't care. That's not my goal. I like it, honestly, slicked back and pressed down and out of the way. And then that's just my personal style, so adding that water really does help. And that's what I do now. So thank you for your question and your suggestion. Next email comes in from Abby in Texas. Hope you're doing well. Sorry I haven't written in the last few weeks. I've been pretty busy. I've been working on jump-starting my art career, and I love listening to VORW while I draw and paint. I've always enjoyed listening to your show while I work on anything because it helps me stay relaxed. As someone who gets easily stressed and anxious, I plan on creating some fan art for you, but I am a master procrastinator who has planned to create fan art for the past few years, so Lord knows if it'll ever come into fruition. For some reason I was wondering, since I know you said you don't cook too much, if you had to pick, do you prefer cooking or baking, and why? Sincerely, Abby in Texas. Well, it depends on the circumstance. Number one, I'm glad that the broadcast is able to really help you stay relaxed. I know these are very, very stressful times for so many of us. And by all means, in terms of any fan art, never feel pressured to ever do anything. It has to be at a pace you're comfortable with in terms of creating those sorts of pieces. To answer your question, cooking versus baking, I would probably go with cooking, just because that would seem more practical to me. Because, I do eat plenty of baked goods, but largely, day to day, I would probably try to do cooking first, and then if I wanted to try to pursue baking, I would go from there. But baking is interesting. Certainly is. It would be fun to try and make anything from different types of breads and pastries to even, heck, try a cake one day, all that sorts of stuff. Even cookies, for the heck of it, why not? Everyone loves cookies, right? But cooking, I think I would focus on first because it's more practical, at least for me, and then also just try baking for fun, because I like them both, I really do, and that's probably what my answer there would be. Next up, Tobias in Central Arkansas checks in. Forgive me if you've already covered this. I've been meaning to write in for a while, but haven't found the time. My question would be more relevant to a month ago, but here goes. What do you think about the recent and massive changes to Taco Bell's menu? Personally, I hate what they've done. They've gotten rid of just about every item that made me excited to go to Taco Bell. No more quesarito and no more beloved cheesy potato griller. Would be interested in hearing your take on these changes, and more broadly on Taco Bell before and after the changes. Thank you, from Tobias. Well, thanks, Tobias, for writing in. It is a question that I've been asked before. I will tell you this right now, I am biased in terms of Taco Bell, because I'm frustrated with how that one video went. I just think it was a really, really stupid move on their part. Obviously, lots of people liked the menu and they got rid of it. They didn't listen, and nor did they care what the customers thought. So, it's a sad move. It's a sad move. I think it ruined a good thing for so many people. And obviously there's huge consistency issues as well that they really don't want you to see. You get this item that looks nothing, you get an empty tortilla, and you're supposed to be okay with that? It's like, I'm just not happy with the way things have turned up for for Taco Bell, so I'm disappointed. I think it was a bad move. There's a few things on the menu that are still good, even a new thing that was decent, the beef burrito, which was good, underrated, but there have been many things over there that I think they really messed up on, and, that's a big problem. So, yeah, they have some issues. They really do, and I think it was a huge mistake to do what they did to the menu. And I know you, along with millions of others, are disappointed. So thank you for your question. Troy has an email. He says two suggestions. Number one, he recommends Bob's Big Boy, which is California's oldest drive-in restaurant. It's a historic monument that has a weekly gathering of classic cars, and where many movies were filmed, plus it's a national chain, albeit in decline. So I'm just gonna... He gives me a website, bobs.net. Let's look. Bob's Big Boy, it's called. Oh, yeah. I think I've even been... I think I was even recommended that a couple times ago. A couple shows ago is what I'm trying to say. Big Boy, right? Now I see the little thing on the side, yeah. Yeah, okay. I mean, it looks cool, though, it's old school, it's retro. It's like one of those old school types of, 50s diners. But looking at the menu, let's see if we get any pictures, Well, from what I see, it looks good. Look, if I ever get the chance to try it out, I'll certainly give it a shot, honestly. But it just looks like a cool, retro, old school type of eatery, something that you see in the 50s, right? You also mention, in terms of over-the-air television, like you, I don't have cable TV, but use an antenna. I'm using a Channel Master CM4228 that I have propped up next to the TV. I get about 50 channels from Philadelphia and Baltimore. Main channels are ABC, Fox, CW, PBS, Ion, etc. Sub-channels are Antenna TV, Cozy TV, MeTV, Court TV, Comet Sci-Fi, Classic Movies, Light Movies, Buzzer, and on and on. Let's see. Yeah, that looks like a good antenna, honestly, the Channel Master one. That is a good one. That looks pretty efficient and effectual. I might even have to improve and get one of those, honestly, but yeah, many of those channels are similar to what I end up with. You also say, I love the VORW show for nighttime listening. Very relaxing. And I also enjoy the weekly food reviews, where I discover a new product to try, such as Arby's waffle fries. I think you should visit Vegas one day and try Gordon Ramsay's fast food restaurant, Fish and Chips, plus his burger restaurant, too. Well, thanks, Troy. It's good to hear from you. I know it's been a little while, but I always appreciate your correspondence. And, number one, I like the antenna that you have. And, secondly, Vegas, Hey, maybe one day, right? Maybe one day. If you're listening in, feedback is welcome to VORWinfo@gmail.com. That's VORWinfo@gmail.com. We've got a few more emails to read, and then that'll be that for the broadcast. So let's continue. Always remember that if you are listening in right now, you enjoy the broadcast, and you want to hear more of it, please consider supporting the show with a donation via PayPal to VORWinfo@gmail.com. Again, via PayPal to VORWinfo@gmail.com. Your support keeps this broadcast going. Please remember that if you enjoy the show. We have a couple more emails, like we were just saying, to get to. Next up, we hear from Tommy. Hi, Reviewbrah. Recently been catching up on all the podcasts on Spotify during my long commute to work. It really helps pass the time of a 45-50-minute drive. I haven't written in since maybe last year, but I wanted to say that I finished the podcast uploaded on August 21st, and it made my day to hear you say that you play RuneScape, especially old school. I spend a lot of my time on old school. By no means am I high level or anything. I usually prefer to do things most people find boring, like mining or fishing. Wish you the best, and stay safe during these crazy times from Tommy. Well, thank you, Tommy. Yeah, RuneScape is interesting. It's one of those games that I'll sometimes play on and off. But, I have a number of accounts, and what I decided to do the other week, just for the fun of it, honestly, was I made a new account and just started from scratch for the fun of it. So, it's just something to do, something fun to do. So, I am by no means I have nothing to brag about on those accounts, but it's just fun. It's just a fun little, time occupier, Next email comes in from Mabel, tuned in from Idaho, who writes, "Hope you're doing well and staying safe during these times. This was for the COVID-19 show, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get it in that show, but I said, well, I'm just going to read it in this show anyway. So you're right. As far as my opinions on the COVID-19 pandemic, I would be delighted if the pandemic ended and things went back to normal, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. First of all, I don't think we can count on a vaccine to get us out of the pandemic. Even if a successful vaccine was made, it would be a year or so before it was actually accessible, and I don't think the vaccine would do much good, because those who get sick from COVID-19 only have immunoglobulins that recognize the virus for 2 to 3 months. This means that immunity only lasts 2 to 3 months. Now, I suppose getting vaccinated every 2 to 3 months is possible. I just don't see it working out. After all, most people don't even get flu shots every year unless they work in a hospital or their job otherwise requires it. Secondly, the virus is just so widespread now that actions taken to quell the virus just aren't going to be as effective as they would have been months ago. To control the virus, nearly all businesses would have to shut down, people wouldn't even be allowed to enter grocery stores, and no gatherings would be allowed. The kind of national efforts needed to control the virus would be so extreme that even the most complacent citizens would be angered, especially after months of much more lenient measures. The way I see it, the best hope we have for the pandemic ending is waiting until COVID-19 mutates and becomes less effective but more infectious, as happened with the influenza epidemic. But while the influenza epidemic only lasted a little under a year and a half, I think we are in for the long haul with COVID-19. The reason I think this is because people developed immunity with influenza and couldn't catch that strain again, but with COVID, you can catch it again and again. Although my outlook might be pessimistic, I've noticed that treatments and preventative measures have grown more refined since spring. Hospitals also have more medical supplies and equipment now, in contrast to the shortages they faced earlier this year. I'm hopeful that we will make this mortality rate as low as it can be. Regardless, Benjamin Franklin was wise to say, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And I've taken his words to heart. So thank you, Mabel in Idaho, for checking in. And it all depends on, if you get it, how long does that immunity last? That's the big question. But again, I think obviously one of the best things that could happen, like you said, is for the virus to mutate, get even weaker, and to the extent where then it will maybe just become kind of like the common cold, where it can exist, it can be out there, but the impacts that it would have on people would be nowhere near as severe as they could be at this point. And then you really wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. It would still be there, but it just would not be, I think, that dice roll that you might get nowadays. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Next question comes in from Mike in Tampa, Florida. I recently had a death in the family, and it got me thinking about a topic I've been wondering about for years. Wakes for the deceased. It's such a terrible thing to put the living through when you think about it. You stand next to the embalmed corpse of your loved one for hours, greet people you haven't seen in years, have to pay to feed those people, and then you're subjected to having them stand around joking or talking, or whatever, while you're there grieving next to your dead loved one. Then you have the embalming of the body itself. Some people choose to be embalmed when they die, and it's such an odd practice for me to even think about. For those not familiar with it, embalming is the process of preserving the recently deceased body by just some of the following steps. Cutting into the neck to place a hose into and out of the arteries to drain the body of blood and replace it with a cocktail of preservative fluids, including a mixture of formaldehyde and perfumes, removing some organs, filling the body cavity with stuffing material, placing eye caps under the eyelids that have tiny raised blades to grab onto the inside of the lid to ensure that it doesn't open, filling the mouth with cotton and sewing the jaw together through the teeth, and gluing the lips shut, and finally building up certain areas with putty and covering up imperfections with makeup. The list goes on and gets pretty gruesome, truth be told, and don't even get me started about what happens during an autopsy, but anyway, I always wondered why someone would want to do that to their body. You're deceased, why not try to preserve the body in such an invasive manner and put yourself on display for your family and friends to view? I worked in a funeral home for a while, and more often than not, I heard relatives of the deceased say things like, "That doesn't look like so-and-so," etc. Then you're placed into the casket surrounded by a usually cement vault to further try to preserve the body by keeping water out to prevent the dirt from caving the lid in on the casket. It's such an odd thing to think about, and it's expensive, bad for the environment, and takes up valuable real estate. When I eventually die, I plan on being cremated, and my ashes can be put into a small urn or scattered. It doesn't really matter to me. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the wake/funeral/embalming process of the Western world? Thanks for taking the time to read my message and keep up the amazing job you do. Mike from Tampa. Thanks, Mike. It is not something that I oppose. I think that, look, everyone grieves differently. That's the thing. Everyone does. Everyone deals with loss differently. Everyone handles death differently. And that's just how it is. Some people, it is their wish to have a standard funeral, so to speak, and I think that should be respected. Other individuals would prefer something simpler. They just want cremation or whatever. They don't want the whole, the whole decorum that surrounds it. So number one, I don't oppose the process, and I don't think it should be done away with. I think number one, most importantly, the wishes of the deceased individual, if expressed previously, should be respected. I think that's the best thing that you could do, as long as it's something practical. But secondly, yes, the funeral industry, it is a business, and funerals are expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars. So, of course, they will try to sell you certain things. And it is sad that death has become a business, but I guess it's the way that it is. When you go to the funeral home and they're trying to sell you the best casket, and sometimes you'll get these salesmen that'll be like, "I think this would be the most respectful one," and this, it's like, you realize you don't know this person who died. It's like you're almost talking for them. "Oh, I think this would be a good fit for them," whatever. It's like, they're just, in the end, they're trying to sell you a product, and you have to realize that. But again, I think everyone mourns differently, and I think that, whether we think it's strange or not, I think at least for some, the process of funerals and wakes does help, at least in certain circumstances. People are able to kind of see the deceased one last time, and I think in some cases that can help with the grieving process. The only thing is that I agree in terms of wakes especially. funeral services or religious services, I think, are a bit different. But the thing about wakes is that sometimes it becomes more of a social event than anything else. Personally, I think that the wake should be the opportunity, to see the deceased. And again, this is purely if it's something that, wants to be done. I don't think it should be mandatory one way or another. But if someone would want to do a wake, I personally think it should not really be a social occasion, but I think it should have that purpose of being able to see the deceased, one last time. And it should be a place for emotion. To just be there to, either pray, to think about whatever it is you would like to think about, pay your respects, and most importantly, let the emotion out. Just let it out. It should really be a place where, acceptably, you should just let the tears flow, just let it all out. Don't hold back one bit. But I think sometimes, because a wake can sometimes be more of a social occasion, you have all these people there, they're all just chatting, it almost seems out of place to express that sort of sadness because you feel like you're almost at some sort of party or something, and it would feel weird doing that around all these people. So then as a result, it's like you can't even express how you really feel because you have all these people there. And, it's just, that's the one thing about wakes that kind of bothers me. I think the funeral service should be more of a place to celebrate the individual's life. And then, depending on one's beliefs, what comes next. But I think the wake should really be that very, very solemn occasion, and really it should just be a place for emotion to be let out, not be pent up. So that's my issue, just in terms of the decorum there. Now, in terms of the embalming process, of course, it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing when you think about what happens to the body. But again, in the end, strange as it might be, I think it should just depend on the wishes of the deceased. If the deceased individual beforehand mentioned a wake and is okay with that, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it. For me, me personally, as morbid a thing that it is, and I can't speak for I don't know how long I'm going to be around for, so I can't speak for the far future, but at least for the near future, honestly, I don't have any real wishes, If I were to die, I don't necessarily care all that much. It's I don't have any sort of specific, I want to be, I want the Hunter Thompson funeral, and I want my ashes, shot out of a cannon or something. It's not like that. But again, I just know everyone's different, and everyone has different views and different last wishes. And again, I think the most important thing of it all, despite the strangeness of some of the practices, it should all depend on what the wishes of the deceased are. And I think that should be the most important thing, and I think those should be respected if at all possible. So that's my view. Thank you for writing in. We have an email coming in from Leslie, writing, I want to talk about something you said in a fairly recent radio broadcast that resonated with me. I could relate to your feelings when you were describing recent events with the Flat Earth Group's radio broadcast. I'm somewhat of an aviation enthusiast, although I realize that term may be a bit generous given my embarrassingly limited knowledge. I just enjoy reading articles about notable historic flights, memorizing airline call signs, etc. It's just a subject I enjoy researching, but anyway. There's been talk in the news recently about Boeing because of investigations linked to faults with their 737 MAX. For the sake of brevity, I won't go into too much detail, but suffice to say, I'm disappointed to see gross negligence and greed lead to such a poor product and ultimately the loss of lives. Perhaps I'm romanticizing the past, but I think back to the pride people would take in their craft during the golden age of flying, and it makes me sad to see how far things have fallen. Maybe that's how you feel seeing broadcasting resources waste on something so useless. Regardless, it's nice to see that the changes you see around you in broadcasting haven't dampened your passion for it. In fact, your enthusiasm is quite contagious. I didn't know what shortwave was before I found your channel, but now I'm buying a shortwave radio, and I am hoping I can follow your example and continue pursuing this hobby of mine, regardless of current events in the field. Anyway, I suppose I just wanted to vent. Most of my friends are of my own demographic, and I haven't found many people in their early 20s who want to start a conversation with me about aviation disasters, so I figured I'd write into the show. Hope that's all right, and I hope you have a great day and stay safe. Sincerely, Leslie. Well, thank you for tuning in, and best of luck with the shortwave purchase, by the way. No, I mean, I agree. I think that it is very comparable in terms of the analogy you drew between, the view of flying versus international broadcasting. I think that's very true. But I think that aviation and stuff is interesting. I can't say I'm the biggest enthusiast, but what I still do is, I will monitor sites like Flight Radar 24, and I'll just look around for fun at the different planes that are in flight right now and look at the call signs and the altitudes and the types of planes that they are and all that stuff. So it is interesting. But sometimes I'll watch these flight simulation videos. There was one that I watched the other day. It was 40 minutes long, and I think some people would find it quite boring. But it was just like a flight simulator with the radio transcripts. It was very well done, but it was called Pilot Dies, Passenger Lands, King Air. And it was about this real incident that happened on April 12th of 2009. Where I guess this man and his family chartered a private plane to fly from Florida to Louisiana. And, there was the pilot, and then there's just the one, the family. I guess the dad in the family, he was also a pilot, but he had only piloted a small single-engine aircraft, like 20 years ago, and only had about, I think it was either 60 or 80 flight hours. I mean, he was not an experienced pilot. And shortly after takeoff, the only pilot of this chartered, very big aircraft has a heart attack, I think, and dies. So now you just have this guy, he's the only one that knows how to fly, and he only has a very, very limited knowledge. And it's up to him to kind of get behind the controls of this sophisticated aircraft and try to land it, or else he and his family will die too. And, he manages to do it. It was crazy. But you hear all the radio transcripts and anything and everything. And honestly, the 40 minutes, it went by pretty quickly for me. Some people might find it boring, but I thought it was very, very interesting. So that might be of interest if you haven't already seen that one. And finally, saving a really interesting one for last, that I think some people might see this and they might be scratching their heads after the fact, and they'll be thinking, what? What the heck is this? But for you long-time listeners, and I'm especially saying, you had to have been listening since 2014, you will remember this individual who had a pretty prominent role to play in some of the broadcasts and is making a return after all these years. My dear Reviewbrah, it is I, Orca Man. It's been a long time. I see you've been keeping busy with your wheelings and dealings. The beef scene is so full of surprises. I myself have been working in a factory of sorts, bathtub of baked beans and all. No more midnight wanderings of late. The flatfoots are too gung-ho and my quarry are too sheepish. Approached a nice lady the other Tuesday. Nice gams, but looked at me. If I'd just unsheathed my danglies, I let her be. I do love wearing a mask in the sunlight, though. Mine has an image of a 90s British television character called Mr. Blobby on it. Do you dream much, sir? I think the streets need more silver twinkle hook and splat. I won't send nudes, not with the healing, the mossy damp stench. Oh, how I've missed you, sir, a man of worth. On October 1st, I'll send to Detroit a putrefied, dehumidified banana boy. Anywho, I've been quacking too long. Gotta plan my next move. What do you think? Shall I use steel or cotton candy? Do we have time for a poem? Perhaps not today. Besides, I'm too limpy from the onion leanings. Glad to see you've thrived from your friend Orca Man. Yeah, I know some people think the emails are weird and they are a little risque, but Orca Man, classic Orca Man. That is the real deal right there. This individual has been a correspondent of this show from the very start, from 2014, and the emails are always in that style, always very out there, but entertaining nonetheless. And I think some of you longtime listeners may remember the feedback there, but yeah, that is. There have been some Orca Man impersonators over the years, but judging by that, I would say that is the legitimate Orca Man corresponding. Well, in terms of your question, I would go with cotton candy, honestly. Cotton candy, never underestimate the fibers of cotton candy. It might seem fragile from a glimpse, but believe me, if utilized correctly, you could take over the world with cotton candy, and it is one of the most powerful materials ever conceived. You just have to know the secrets and how to use it in order to unleash the metaphorical cotton candy beast. So I would definitely say steel is the easy answer, but cotton candy is really where the true power is. So that is my advice to you. Always a pleasure to hear from you, though, and good to know you're still listening in. And with that, that's all the time that we have for today's broadcast. A huge thank you to everyone who sat here for all the hours and listened to my babblings and discussions, but I hope this broadcast was enjoyable for you. It was truly a pleasure to record, and we will be here again in the middle of the month, probably for a shorter show, but then I will promote the special Halloween broadcast. If you do want to get a head start on it, feel free. The broadcast will be uploaded on Halloween, and considering, let's see what day of the week Halloween is this time around. It is a Saturday. I think what I will do is I'll syndicate it over the shortwave, too, for the fun of it, because why not? It won't be a music show, but why the heck not? So, it'll go out on all the podcast platforms on YouTube, and I'll broadcast it over the international airwaves, too, for many, many thousands and thousands of listeners all across North America. I'll put it out on 5850, the big frequency that I think most people listen to the show on. So I'll certainly get it out, but if you do want to get a head start, if you have any paranormal experiences, any ghost stories, could be paranormal or just strange cryptid encounters or anything just related to the spookier side of things, you can submit them in writing to VORWINFO@gmail.com, or if you'd prefer to enunciate them, pick up a microphone, pick up your phone, whatever you want to record audio with, and tell your story, and then send the audio file to VORWINFO@gmail.com, but probably the earlier you send it, depending on how many come in, the better a chance we'll have of getting it on the air. So if you do want to get in on the action, the show is a go, it is confirmed, and, if there's something you really want to share right now, go for it. Otherwise, please be safe out there, be healthy. We'll see what happens with all the COVID-19, spreading in the U.S. Government. But either way, I think the election, it's going to be a crazy time. So, just stay safe out there, stay healthy, and keep the peace. Be a good person. More important than anything else. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. This is VORW International signing off.